The void between dimensions screamed. Space itself tore open above the amber clouds of an unnamed gas giant in the outer rim, a wound in reality that burned with colors no natural phenomenon could produce. Crackling tendrils of energy, neither hyperspace blue nor ion white, but something fundamentally other, lashed outward as the fabric of the universe protested this violent intrusion. Then, with a sound that existed only in the force-sensitive nightmares of distant Jedi, something impossible emerged. The space battleship Yamato erupted into the Star Wars galaxy trailing cosmic fire. Her hull, a deep blue-gray that seemed to absorb the light of distant stars, stretched over 300 meters of Earthborn engineering that had never been meant for this universe. The distinctive raised bow, built to house weapons beyond this galaxy's comprehension, cut through the spatial distortion like an ancient warship breaching storm-tossed seas. Red-striped stabilizers flared as maneuvering thrusters fought to compensate for the dimensional translation, and the massive wave motion engine, its core burning with cosmo energy that predated hyperspace theory by eons, pulsed erratically as it struggled to synchronize with unfamiliar physical laws. On the bridge, alarms shrieked in Japanese. Captain. Hull integrity at 78%. Tactical Officer Susumu Kodai gripped his console as the ship shuddered, his knuckles white against the metal. The young officer's dark uniform was already soaked with sweat despite the bridge's cooling systems working overtime. Wave motion engine output unstable, dimensional coordinates completely unknown. Captain Juzo Okita stood firm at the center of the command platform, his weathered face betraying nothing of the chaos surrounding him. The white-haired veteran had led the Yamato across 148,000 light-years to save Earth from the Gamala's radioactive bombing. He had faced planet-killing weapons, dimensional anomalies, and the death of countless crew members with the same unshakable resolve. But this was different. All stop, Okita commanded, his voice cutting through the panic with practiced authority. Damage control teams to critical sections. Sanada, status of the wave motion gun. Chief Engineer Shiro Sanada's fingers flew across his engineering station, his analytical mind already processing thousands of data points. Wave motion gun is intact, Captain, but the dimensional jump has affected the Cosmo energy matrix. Recharge time has increased to approximately 8 hours. The wave motion engine is functional for sublight and FTL travel, but, he paused, frowning at readings that made no sense. Sir, we're not reading any tachyon streams. No dimensional fold markers. It's as if hyperspace travel, as we understand it, doesn't exist here. Then where the hell are we? Communications Officer Ehara's voice cracked slightly as he stared at his sensor displays. Captain, I'm picking up electromagnetic signals on multiple frequencies. Some kind of galactic scale communication network, but the languages, they're all completely unknown. And the stellar cartography, he looked up, his young face pale. None of our star charts match. Not one constellation. Not one navigational reference point. The implications settled over the bridge like a funeral shroud. They weren't lost in their own universe. They were lost in someone else's. Sir, contact. Radar operator Yuki Mori's sharp voice snapped every head toward the tactical display. The young woman's fingers danced across her console, bringing up a sensor image that made several bridge officers inhale sharply. Bearing 270, distance 300,000 kilometers and closing. Configuration unknown, but mass signature indicates a vessel over 1,600 meters in length. Energy readings are, she paused, recalibrating. Captain, their weapons are hot. They're in an attack posture. On the main view screen, the shape resolved from sensor blur to terrible clarity. It was a wedge of brutal Imperial engineering, an Imperial Star Destroyer, its dagger-shaped hull bristling with turbolaser batteries and tractor beam projectors. To the Yamato's crew, who had spent years fighting the curved, organic vessels of the Gamala's empire, this ship was a statement of raw, geometric violence. No curves. No elegance. Just overwhelming firepower arranged in the most efficient killing pattern possible. They're hailing us, Ehara reported. Audio and visual transmission. Wait. He adjusted his console, confusion crossing his features. The language is translating automatically through some kind of carrier wave. I'm patching it through. The view screen flickered, and Captain Okita found himself face to face with a human officer whose uniform spoke of military precision and casual cruelty. The man's gray Imperial uniform was immaculate, his cap bearing an insignia that meant nothing to Earth's defenders but clearly denoted significant rank. Behind him, the bridge of the Star Destroyer hummed with activity, officers in black moving with efficient purpose between stations that looked simultaneously familiar and alien. Unknown vessel, the Imperial captain's voice was clipped, accented with core world superiority. You have entered Imperial space without authorization and are transmitting no recognized transponder codes. By order of the Galactic Empire, you will power down your weapons systems and prepare to be boarded for inspection. Failure to comply will result in your immediate destruction. You have 30 seconds to respond. Okita's jaw tightened. He'd heard threats like this before, from the Gamlas, from the Comet Empire, from every would-be tyrant who thought superior firepower equaled absolute authority. The answer had always been the same. Ehara, open a channel. Kodai, bring weapons to standby, quietly. Sanada, what are our tactical options? The engineer's response was grim. Against a vessel that size? Unknown weapon systems, unknown defensive capabilities. If they're hostile, we're outmassed 8-1. 30 seconds, Yuki reported softly. Okita straightened his uniform and nodded to Ehara. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of Earth's survival, because that's what the Yamato had always represented. Humanity's last, desperate hope. This is Captain Juzo Okita of the space battleship Yamato, Earth Defense Force. We mean no harm and seek only to understand where we are and repair our vessel. We will not power down our defensive systems, but we are willing to negotiate peacefully. The Imperial captain's expression shifted from board superiority to something darker. Earth Defense Force. There is no such organization in Imperial records. Your vessel's design is unregistered. Your energy signature is unlike anything in the known galaxy. He leaned forward slightly. You will comply, or you will be destroyed. This is your final warning. Kodai's hand hovered over the firing controls. Around the bridge, every officer tensed. Okita's mind raced. They were damaged, lost, and facing an enemy whose capabilities were completely unknown in a galaxy they didn't understand. The Yamato could fight, of that, he had no doubt, but at what cost? How many battles could they survive before their mission to return home became impossible? Captain, Sanada said quietly, their weapons are charging. Multiple energy signatures converging on targeting solutions. 20 seconds had become 5. Okita made his decision. Kodai, evasive pattern delta. All batteries, defensive fire only, disable their targeting sensors but avoid critical systems. Sanada, calculate an emergency FTL jump, any direction that takes us away from this contact. Sir, Kodai began. We're not starting a war in a galaxy we don't understand, Kodai. But we're not surrendering the Yamato either. Execute. The space battleship Yamato's engines flared brilliant blue-white as she banked hard, her shock cannons already rotating toward the Star Destroyer. In 30 seconds, the galaxy far, far away would learn that Earth's last battleship hadn't crossed dimensions to bow to another empire. And the empire would learn that not all unknown vessels were easy prey. If you want to see more legendary ships and characters enter the Star Wars galaxy, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a ship or character you'd want to see in the comments below. May the Force be with you. The first shots were about to be fired, and neither side fully understood what they were about to unleash. The Imperial Star Destroyer Relentless had faced pirates, rebel corvettes, and even the occasional foolhardy smuggler who thought they could outrun Imperial justice. Captain Thrawn, not yet the Grand Admiral he would become, but already marked for greatness, had seen his share of unusual encounters in the Outer Rim's lawless sectors. He had never seen anything like this. "All batteries, open fire," he ordered calmly, watching the unknown vessel execute a maneuver that shouldn't have been possible for something that size. The blue-gray warship rotated on its axis with the precision of a starfighter, presenting its dorsal surface to the turbolaser barrage while simultaneously accelerating at a vector that defied standard capital ship performance parameters. The Relentless unleashed hell. Green turbolaser bolts, each carrying enough energy to vaporize a small building, lanced across the void in a pattern that should have reduced any ship to expanding plasma. Thrawn watched with the detached interest of a predator studying new prey, already calculating firing solutions, energy dispersal patterns, and tactical responses. The Yamato's shields flared brilliant orange-white as the first volley connected. And held. "Target's shields are holding," the tactical officer reported, surprise creeping into his trained voice. "Energy dispersion pattern is unusual, sir. It's not deflector technology. The shield appears to be some form of synchronized wave motion barrier." Thrawn's red eyes narrowed with interest. "Intensify forward batteries. I want full analysis of their defensive." The Yamato fired back. Her shock cannons were not turbolasers. They were rapid-fire positron beam weapons designed to shred Gamala's cruisers at close range, and when they spoke with a different dialect of violence than anything in the Imperial arsenal. Blue-white beams, dozens of them, erupted from the Yamato's hull in a synchronized pattern that turned space into a web of destructive energy. The Relentless shuddered as impacts walked across her forward shields. Alarms began to wail as shield generators suddenly found themselves processing an entirely unfamiliar form of energy attack, positron streams that didn't behave like ion cannons or particle beams but something fundamentally different. The shields held, but power consumption spiked dangerously. "Shields at 72%, the tactical officer called out. "Sir, their weapons aren't targeting our hull, they're specifically hitting our sensor arrays and targeting computers." Thrawn allowed himself the ghost of a smile. Intelligent. Precise. This wasn't a random merchant vessel stumbling into Imperial space. This was a warship commanded by someone who understood the value of tactical denial over simple destruction. Someone who, like Thrawn himself, preferred winning through superior planning rather than overwhelming force. "Recall the initial assessment," Thrawn ordered. "This is not a smuggler or pirate. Tactical, analyze their attack pattern. Communications, are they still transmitting?" "Yes, sir," the communications officer replied, adjusting his headset. "They're broadcasting on multiple frequencies. The translation matrix is having difficulty, but the intent seems to be, they're asking us to stand down. They claim they don't want to fight. While simultaneously disabling our targeting systems," Thrawn observed. "Fascinating. They fight only enough to create an escape opportunity, not to destroy us. Launch TIE fighters. I want them harassed but not destroyed. Let's see how they respond to multiple threat vectors." On the Yamato's bridge, Yuki's radar display suddenly filled with new contacts. "Captain. Multiple small craft launching from the enemy vessel. Count is 24 and rising. They're fast, sir. Acceleration profiles exceeding anything in our database." She looked up, concerned. "They're configured like fighters, but with no visible life support systems. They might be drones." "Not drones," Okita replied grimly, watching the TIE fighters swarm toward them on the main screen like angry insects. "Pilots willing to fly in vessels with minimal protection. Kodai, launch the Cosmo Tigers. 6 birds, defensive patrol pattern. I want them keeping those fighters away from our hull, not pursuing dogfights." "Yes, sir." Kodai's fingers flew across his console. Throughout the Yamato's lower decks, klaxons blared as the fighter bay pressurized. Pilots sprinted toward their craft, sleek, angular fighters that looked like mechanical dragonflies, their wings carrying missile pods and beam cannons. The hangar bay doors opened to the void, and the Cosmo Tigers launched. Flight leader Yamamoto pulled his stick back, feeling his fighter respond with the perfect precision that came from hundreds of combat sorties. His squadron formed up behind him, 5 other pilots who'd fought their way across the galaxy and back. They'd faced Gamala's fighter screens, Gatlantis missile swarms, and the endless void of deep space. They'd never faced TIE fighters. "What the hell are those things?" his wingman called out as the Imperial fighters closed. "They're flying coffins, no visible shields, no armor plating I can detect. They're just engines strapped to a cockpit." "Don't underestimate them," Yamamoto warned, his tactical computer already identifying the lead TIE's approach vector. "Anything that flies is dangerous in the right hands. Engage at will, but remember, defensive pattern only. Don't let them draw us away from the ship." The 2 fighter forces met between the capital ships like ancient cavalry charges translated into the void. A TIE fighter screamed past Yamamoto's canopy at point-blank range, its twin ion engines creating a distinctive roar even in vacuum, a sound transmitted through sensor feedback and comm interference that experienced pilots learned to recognize. The Imperial pilot was good, rolling through firing solutions with the practiced efficiency of endless drilling. But Yamamoto was better. His beam cannon spoke once, a precise lance of energy that caught the TIE's port solar panel. The fighter tumbled away, systems dead, pilot already reaching for whatever emergency beacon Imperial ships carried. Yamamoto didn't pursue. Another TIE was already lining up on his wingman, and the dance continued. In the relentless bridge, Thrawn watched the fighter engagement with growing fascination. "Their fighters are individually superior," he observed calmly. "Better shields, heavier armament, more durable construction. But our pilots outnumber them 4-1. Tactical, redirect Squadron Gamma to attack run on the enemy vessel's engines. Let's test their point defense capabilities." 12 TIE fighters peeled away from the dogfight, accelerating toward the Yamato's stern in a coordinated attack pattern that would have overwhelmed most capital ships' defensive fire. They closed to weapons range, their chin-mounted laser cannons already tracking targeting solutions. The Yamato's point defense grid activated. Dozens of smaller shock cannons, designed specifically to shred incoming missiles and fighter craft, opened up in a synchronized pattern that turned the approach vector into a killing field. The defensive fire was precise, calculated, and absolutely merciless. 3 TIEs exploded in quick succession. 2 more tumbled away with critical damage. The remainder broke off, their attack run shattered before they could even fire a shot. "Point defense efficiency is extraordinary," the tactical officer reported, impressed despite himself. "Computer-guided tracking with response times faster than manual targeting. Sir, if they can maintain that level of defensive fire, our standard attack patterns won't be effective." Thrawn nodded slowly. "Then we don't use standard patterns. Helm, bring us about. Put the relentless between them and their escape vector. Communications, open a channel." On the Yamato's bridge, Okita watched the massive Star Destroyer rotate ponderously, its bulk moving to block their most obvious FTL escape route. His tactical display showed the remaining TIE fighters reforming, the dogfight having proven inconclusive. Both sides had tested each other. Both had learned. "They're hailing again, Captain," Ihara reported. On screen. The Imperial captain appeared once more, but this time his expression had shifted from arrogant certainty to something approaching respect. Behind him, Okita could see bridge officers working with renewed urgency. "Unknown vessel, your tactical capabilities are impressive. But you cannot win this engagement. More Imperial ships are already en route to this sector. In 1 hour, you will face 3 Star Destroyers instead of 1. The Imperial captain leaned forward slightly. "I am prepared to offer terms. Surrender your vessel for inspection, and your crew will be treated with appropriate consideration under Imperial law." Okita met the man's gaze through the view screen. "You're wrong, Captain. There's always a third option. And that would be, we leave. And you don't stop us." The Imperial captain's expression hardened. That is not an option I am offering. Then we're at an impasse, Okita replied calmly. Because the Yamato will not surrender to an empire we don't recognize, in a galaxy we don't understand, to face laws we had no hand in creating. We will defend ourselves, and if forced, we will fight with everything we have. He paused, letting the weight of his next word settle. I don't know what weapon systems you're familiar with, Captain. But I suggest you review your sensor data on our main forward battery. Then ask yourself if you're prepared to bet your ship and crew on the assumption that we're bluffing. On the Relentless bridge, the tactical officer quickly pulled up the sensor analysis of the Yamato's unusual bow configuration. The massive energy signatures housed there had been registering since first contact, but standard Imperial doctrine had assumed them to be oversized deflector generators or shield arrays. Now, examining the readings more carefully, the officer felt his blood run cold. Sir, he said quietly. If these readings are accurate, that forward weapon contains enough potential energy to, he trailed off, running the calculations again because surely they had to be wrong. Sir, it could potentially destroy the Relentless with a single shot. Thrawn studied the data himself, his brilliant tactical mind already processing implications. A weapon of that magnitude would require enormous power generation, significant charge time, and would likely leave the vessel vulnerable during firing preparation. But if this ship had already survived dimensional travel, a feat that shouldn't be possible, then perhaps impossible weapons weren't impossible after all. Communications, inform the unknown vessel that we will allow them to withdraw, Thrawn ordered. But tell them that this entire sector is now on alert. They will be tracked. They will be monitored. And if they prove to be a threat to Imperial security, they will be destroyed. Okita allowed himself a small breath of relief. Inform the enemy captain we are withdrawing. Sanada, prepare for emergency FTL jump, any vector that takes us away from Imperial vessels. Calculated and ready, Captain, Sanada confirmed. But sir, without hyperspace lanes or navigational data, we'll be jumping blind. We could emerge anywhere, inside a star, a planetary atmosphere, or deeper into hostile territory. Or we could find a safe harbor, Okita countered. Helm, execute jump on my mark. All fighters, return to ship. The Cosmo Tigers streaked back toward the Yamato's hangar bay, their pilots grateful to have survived their first encounter with this galaxy's warriors. The TIE fighters held position, watching but not pursuing. All fighters recovered, Captain, Kodai reported. Ship is secure for FTL transition. Execute, Okita ordered. The wave motion engine pulsed deep in the Yamato's heart, its cosmo energy surging through systems that had never been designed for this universe's physical laws. Space warped around the ship, not the clean hyperspace jump of Star Wars technology, but something rawer, more violent. Reality screamed again, and the space battleship Yamato vanished in a flash of blue-white light. On the Relentless bridge, Thrawn watched the unknown vessel disappear and allowed himself a rare moment of speculation. Log everything, he ordered his crew. Ship configuration, weapon signatures, tactical patterns, communication frequencies. Forward all data to Imperial Intelligence and to the Executor. He paused. And send a personal message to Lord Vader. Inform him that we have encountered a vessel of unknown origin with capabilities that may rival the late Death Star's destructive potential. The tactical officer looked up, startled. Sir, do you really believe? I believe, Thrawn interrupted calmly, that somewhere in this galaxy, a ship from another reality is trying to find its way home. And I believe the Empire would very much like to acquire such technology. His red eyes reflected the starlight where the Yamato had vanished. The question is whether they'll let us take it willingly, or whether we'll need to pry it from their burning wreckage. Somewhere in the outer rim, the Yamato dropped out of FTL near a desolate moon. Alarms wailed as damage control teams rushed to repair systems strained by the emergency jump. Captain Okita stood on his bridge, looking out at unfamiliar stars, and made a silent promise to his crew. They would survive this. They would find a way home. And they would do it without becoming pawns in someone else's war. The moon was designated KR 7743 on imperial charts, a worthless ball of rock and ice orbiting a dying red giant in a system so remote that even smugglers rarely bother to hide there. It had no atmosphere, no resources worth mining, and no strategic value whatsoever. For the Yamato, it was perfect. All systems standing down to minimal power, Sanada reported, his voice hoarse with exhaustion. The emergency FTL jump had pushed the wave motion engine beyond safe parameters, and his engineering teams had been working non-stop for 6 hours to prevent a catastrophic cascade failure. We need at least 48 hours for full repairs, Captain. The dimensional transition damaged microfractures throughout the whole superstructure that I didn't catch initially. If we'd stayed in that engagement another 10 minutes. He didn't need to finish. Everyone on the bridge understood how close they'd come. Okita nodded slowly, feeling every one of his years pressing down on him. The radiation sickness that had nearly killed him during the original Iskander mission was in remission, but moments like this reminded him that he was an old man commanding a ship crewed largely by young people who trusted him to bring them home. The weight of that responsibility never got lighter. Begin repairs, he ordered. Rotating shifts, no one works more than 8 hours without rest. Kodai, organize security patrols around the ship. If that Star Destroyer managed to track us, I want advance warning before they arrive. He paused, looking at the main view screen where the barren moon's surface stretched endlessly. Ehara, any luck decoding those communication signals? The communications officer looked up from his console, dark circles under his eyes. For the past 6 hours, he'd been attempting to make sense of the electromagnetic chatter that filled this galaxy's airwaves. Some progress, sir. The translation matrix that the Imperial vessel used appears to be some kind of universal standard, possibly ancient technology that predates their current civilization. I've managed to isolate several distinct languages, but the dominant one seems to be called Basic. It's surprisingly similar to English in structure, which is either the strangest coincidence in two universes or suggests something we don't understand about linguistic evolution. Can you access their information networks? Sanada asked. If we're going to survive here, we need to understand the political landscape, technology base, and navigational data. Ehara shook his head. Their networks appear to be highly encrypted and compartmentalized. Military channels especially. But I am picking up civilian broadcasts, news, entertainment, public information channels. From what I can gather, he pulled up a holographic display showing a rough map pieced together from dozens of sources. We're in something called the Galactic Empire. Centralized government spanning millions of systems. Humanocentric political structure. Recent major conflict involving something called the Death Star, a battle station capable of destroying entire planets, that was apparently destroyed by a rebel faction. The bridge fell silent. A planet-destroying weapon wasn't theoretical here. It had been real, had been used, and had been destroyed only recently. Mother of God, Kodai whispered. What kind of galaxy did we fall into? The kind that makes our war with the Gamalas look like a border skirmish, Yuki said quietly, her radar display showing the electromagnetic spectrum of a civilization that spanned a significant portion of an entire galaxy. Captain, based on the signal density and distribution patterns, we're talking about a civilization orders of magnitude larger than anything in our universe. Millions of inhabited worlds. Trillions of sentient beings. And they just casually mentioned destroying planets as military strategy. Okita absorbed this information with the same steady calm he'd shown when Earth was dying under radioactive bombardment. Then we need to be very careful about who we trust and what alliances we make. Ehara, keep monitoring those broadcasts. I want to know everything you can learn about this rebel faction and the Empire's current military disposition. Sanada, priority to sensors and the wave motion engine. If we need to run again, I want us ready. Captain, Dr. Sato's gruff voice came through the intercom from the medical bay. We've got 3 injured from that fighter engagement. Nothing life-threatening, but I want them off active duty for at least 48 hours. How's morale holding up on the bridge? We're managing, Dr. Okita replied. How are supplies? Food and medical provisions are adequate for approximately 4 months at current consumption rates. Water recycling is functioning normally. But Captain, the ship's doctor paused. If we can't find a way home soon, we're going to need to start thinking about resupply. This ship was designed for a one-way mission to Iskander and back, not indefinite operation in hostile territory. 4 months. The number hung in the air like a death sentence. Understood, Doctor. Keep me informed of any changes. Okita closed the channel and looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew, young men and women who'd already sacrificed so much to save Earth. I know you're all thinking the same thing. We're trapped in an unknown galaxy, hunted by an empire we don't understand, with finite supplies and no clear path home. But I want you to remember something: we've been in impossible situations before. When we launched from Earth, everyone said we'd never reach Iskander. They said the Gamalas would destroy us. They said we'd all die in the cold of space, chasing a desperate hope. He stood, his uniform crisp despite the hours of continuous duty. But we didn't die. We reached Iskander. We brought the Cosmo Cleaner back to Earth. We saved 8 billion lives because we refused to accept that impossible meant defeated. This situation is no different. We will find a way home. We will survive. And we will do it together, as we always have. The crew straightened slightly, finding reserves of determination they hadn't known they still possessed. Captain, Yuki suddenly called out, her voice sharp with alarm. Contact. Single vessel dropping out of FTL, she paused, recalibrating. Configuration unknown. It's not Imperial design. Mass is approximately 400 meters. Energy signature is, civilian-grade engines but with military-level shield generators and weapons. On the main view screen, the new arrival resolved into focus. It was a battered YT-1300 light freighter that had clearly seen better days, decades worth of modifications, repairs, and jury-rigged systems giving it the appearance of a ship held together by prayer and stubbornness. But despite its ramshackle appearance, it moved with practiced grace, and its approach vector was deliberately non-threatening. They're hailing us, Ehara reported. Audio only. Transmitting in basic and, wait, they're using multiple languages. Whoever they are, they're trying to make sure we can understand them. On speakers, Okita ordered, hand resting on his sidearm. The voice that came through was male, confident, and carried the unmistakable tone of someone who talked their way out of more dangerous situations than they could count. Unknown vessel, this is the Millennium Falcon. I don't know who you are or where you came from, but I just watched Imperial HoloNet chatter go absolutely crazy about a mystery ship that embarrassed a star destroyer and vanished into the Outer Rim. Now, I'm a curious guy, and I happen to be in the business of helping people who the Empire wants dead. So here's my question: are you folks looking for a friend, or should I mind my own business and jump out before the Imperials show up? Kodai's hand moved toward weapons control. Captain, this could be a trap. How did they find us? If it's a trap, they could have brought Imperial ships with them, Sanada pointed out. The fact that they came alone suggests either extreme confidence or genuine intent. Okita considered. They needed information. They needed allies who understood this galaxy. They needed someone who could help them navigate the impossible complexity of a civilization that spanned millions of worlds. They also needed to be very careful about trusting strangers who made a living operating outside Imperial law. Ehara, open a channel. Limited visual, show me, but don't give them full bridge access. The communications officer nodded and activated the view screen. The image that appeared showed 2 humans, one younger with sandy blonde hair and an expression of barely controlled excitement, the other older with a roguish grin and the kind of casual stance that suggested he was comfortable in any crisis. This is Captain Juzo Okita of the space battleship Yamato, Okita said formally. We appreciate your interest, but we're not in the habit of trusting strangers who conveniently appear after we've made enemies of the local military. How did you find us, and what exactly are you offering? The older man, the pilot, Okita assumed, actually laughed. Fair question. Name's Han Solo, this is Luke Skywalker. As for how we found you, let's just say the rebellion has good intelligence networks and leave it at that. What we're offering is simple: information, supplies, and a safe harbor where the Empire won't find you while you figure out your next move. His expression became more serious. Look, Captain, I've been running from Imperials my whole life. I know what it's like to be hunted in a galaxy where you don't know who to trust. But the Rebel Alliance, the people I work with, they're fighting to restore freedom to this galaxy. And from what I've heard, you folks handed a Star Destroyer its ass without trying to conquer anything or steal anything. That tells me you're either incredibly stupid or actually decent people. Could be both, Luke added with a slight smile that somehow made him seem younger than his years. True, Han admitted. But the point is, the rebellion could use friends like you. And you could use friends who know how to stay one step ahead of the Empire. So what do you say, Captain? Want to hear what we have to offer, or should I jump out and let you handle this galaxy on your own? Okita studied the two men on the screen. The older one, Solo, had the weathered look of someone who'd survived by being smart, fast, and just a little lucky. The younger one, Skywalker, had something else in his eyes. A quality that Okita recognized from his own crew, someone who'd faced death and come through the other side with their idealism intact. Against his better judgment, Okita found himself trusting them. Or at least trusting them more than he trusted the Empire that had tried to force their surrender. You can dock with us, Mr. Solo. But understand that we're monitoring your ship and will respond to any hostile action immediately. You'll be escorted at all times while aboard the Yamato, and you'll answer our questions before we commit to anything. Han's grin widened. Wouldn't have it any other way, Captain. Transmitting docking approach now. Oh, and fair warning, I've got a Wookiee co-pilot who's going to be very interested in your ship's technology. Try not to shoot him. He gets cranky when people point guns at him. Wookiee. Okita looked at Ehara, who shrugged helplessly. Large, strong, covered in fur, very loyal, very dangerous, Luke explained helpfully. Don't worry, Chewie's friendly once he gets to know you. The communication ended, and the Millennium Falcon began its approach to the Yamato's docking port. Okita turned to Kodai. Assemble a security team. Full sidearms, but weapons holstered unless I give the order. I want them escorted to the conference room, not the bridge. And Kodai? He met his tactical officer's eyes. If this goes wrong, you have command. Get the ship to safety. Sir. That's an order, Kodai. As the battered freighter settled into the Yamato's docking bay with a hiss of equalizing pressure, Captain Juzo Okita prepared to meet representatives of a rebellion fighting an empire that controlled a galaxy. He didn't know if they were potential allies or simply a different kind of threat. But he was about to find out. And somewhere deep in Imperial space, aboard the massive Super Star Destroyer Executor, Darth Vader reviewed the tactical data from the relentless encounter and felt a disturbance in the force that he couldn't quite identify. Something from beyond. Something powerful. Something that would require his personal attention. Han Solo had seen a lot of strange ships in his years smuggling across the galaxy. He'd flown past ancient dreadnoughts from the Clone Wars, navigated asteroid fields filled with derelict separatist cruisers, and once made a Kessel run that took him uncomfortably close to a Hutt pleasure barge he'd rather forget. But walking through the corridors of the Yamato was like stepping into a museum of a civilization that had never existed. The walls were painted in muted blues and grays, with Japanese characters stenciled beside what appeared to be universal hazard symbols. The lighting was softer than Imperial ships, less sterile than rebel vessels, almost comfortable, as if the designers had actually considered that humans would be living here for extended periods. The corridors were wider than standard military vessels, and every surface showed signs of meticulous maintenance despite visible battle damage. "This ship feels old," Luke said quietly, one hand trailing along the wall as they followed their armed escort, 6 young men and women in dark blue uniforms who watched the visitors with professional wariness. "Not old like it's falling apart. Old like it has history." "Can you feel it, Han?" "I feel that we're being watched by about 50 gun ports we can't see," Han muttered back. "And that our hosts are one wrong move away from spacing us." Chewbacca rumbled agreement, his massive frame barely fitting through doorways designed for average-sized humans. The Wookiee's keen eyes catalogued every detail, the weapon emplacements disguised as maintenance panels, the blast doors that could seal off sections in seconds, the crew members they passed who moved with military precision despite their youth. The security escort leader, a stern woman who'd introduced herself as Ensign Mori, stopped before a reinforced door. "Captain Okita is waiting inside. You will address him with respect. You will answer his questions honestly. Any attempt at deception or violence will be met with immediate force." "Understood." "Crystal clear, ma'am," Han said with his most charming smile. It had exactly zero effect on Ensign Mori's professional demeanor. The door opened to reveal a conference room that looked like it had been designed for war councils. A long table dominated the center, surrounded by chairs. Display screens lined the walls, currently showing star charts that Han didn't recognize, different constellations, different reference points, as if someone had tried to map the galaxy from scratch using incomplete data. And at the head of the table sat Captain Okita, flanked by 2 other officers. Okita stood as they entered, gesturing to chairs across from him. "Please, sit. This is Chief Engineer Shiro Sanada and Tactical Officer Susumu Kodai. You've already met Ensign Mori." He waited until everyone was seated, Chewbacca standing behind Han because no chair would support him, before continuing. "Now, Mr. Solo. You said you represent the Rebel Alliance. I'd like to hear what that means." Han glanced at Luke, who nodded encouragingly. Kid had more faith in people than was probably healthy. "The Galactic Empire used to be the Galactic Republic," Han began, deciding honesty was probably the best policy with these people. "About 20 years ago, there was a war, the Clone Wars. Republic against Separatists. When the dust settled, the Republic's Supreme Chancellor declared himself Emperor, the Jedi were wiped out, and suddenly we were living under a dictatorship. The Rebel Alliance formed to fight back. To restore the Republic and freedom to the galaxy. The Jedi," Sanada said, his analytical mind clearly cataloging information. "We've intercepted references to them. Some kind of religious order with supernatural abilities." "The Force," Luke said, speaking for the first time since entering. "It's an energy field created by all living things. The Jedi were its guardians, peacekeepers who used the Force to protect the galaxy for thousands of generations. The Empire hunted them down because they represented everything the Emperor opposed: compassion, justice, selflessness." Kodai's expression was skeptical. "Supernatural powers. You're asking us to believe in magic." "I'm asking you to keep an open mind," Luke replied calmly. "The Force is real. I've felt it. Used it. It's as real as your ship's engines or the air you're breathing. It's just, operating on principles your science might not have encountered yet." Okita held up a hand, forestalling further debate. "Let's table the philosophical discussion for now. Mr. Solo, you said the rebellion could offer us sanctuary. Where? And at what cost?" This was the tricky part. Han took a breath. "The Alliance operates from hidden bases throughout the Outer Rim. Our main base is, somewhere secure. I can't tell you exactly where unless you commit to meeting with our leadership. As for cost..." He shrugged. "Information, mostly. We want to know where you came from, what your capabilities are, and whether you're a threat to our operations. Beyond that, the Alliance doesn't force anyone to fight. If you want to repair your ship and disappear into the unknown regions, that's your business. But if you're interested in helping us kick the Empire's teeth in, we could use a ship like this. You want us to join your war, Okita said flatly. I want to offer you a choice, Han corrected. Right now, you're hunted. The Empire has your energy signature, your tactical profile, and Captain Thrawn analyzing every second of your engagement with the Relentless. Trust me, Thrawn doesn't forget and he doesn't give up. Within a week, every Imperial ship in 3 sectors will be looking for you. You need allies who can help you stay hidden while you figure out how to get home, because you are trying to get home, right? The officers exchanged glances. Okita's expression remained neutral, but Han had played enough sabacc to recognize a tell when he saw one. These people were desperate, even if they hid it well. We're from another universe, Sanada said abruptly, his engineer's practicality cutting through the diplomatic dancing. Not another galaxy. Another reality entirely. Our ship crossed a dimensional barrier during an emergency faster-than-light jump. We have no idea how to reverse the process, no idea if it's even possible, and we're operating in a galaxy where our technology is completely unfamiliar and our supply lines don't exist. The conference room fell silent. Han stared at the engineer, trying to process what he'd just heard. Another universe, Luke said slowly. That would explain why your ship's design doesn't match anything in Imperial or Republic records. Why your weapons work differently. Why you appeared out of nowhere with no hyperspace signature. His eyes widened slightly. The Force would have sensed something like that. A tear in reality. That's why I felt drawn to this sector. I thought it was just instinct, but it was the Force guiding me to something important. You're telling me you crossed dimensions, Han said, his usual confident tone wavering. Like, actually jumped between separate universes? Not intentionally, Okita replied. Our wave motion engine was damaged during combat. The jump destabilized, and when we emerged, we were here. In your galaxy. With no way home that we've yet discovered. Chewbacca growled a long, complex statement. Han nodded. Chewie's right. If the Empire finds out you're from another dimension, they won't just try to capture your ship, they'll dissect it. And you. Palpatine's been obsessed with superweapons since before the Clone Wars ended. A ship that can cross dimensional barriers. That's the kind of technology he'd burn entire systems to acquire. Which is why we're not broadcasting our origin story, Kodai said sharply. And why we need to know if we can trust you before we commit to anything. Fair, Han admitted. So here's what I propose, come with us to meet Alliance leadership. Let them hear your story. Let our best scientists and strategists, people who've been fighting the Empire for years, help you figure out if there's a way home. In exchange, share what you're willing to share about your technology and capabilities. No obligations, no commitments. Just, give us a chance to prove we're the good guys here. And if we refuse? Okita asked. Han met his gaze steadily. Then we leave, you stay here until your repairs are done, and you take your chances with the Empire. But Captain, I've been around long enough to know when someone's in over their head. You're a long way from home with enemies you don't understand and resources that won't last forever. The Alliance isn't perfect, but we're your best shot at survival. Okita stood, walking to one of the wall displays showing their incomplete star charts. In our universe, Earth faced extinction. A race called the Gamlas bombarded our planet with radioactive meteors, poisoning the surface and driving humanity underground. We had 1 year before our species died. 1 year to travel 148,000 light-years to a planet called Iskander, retrieve technology to cleanse Earth, and return home. He turned to face them. We made that journey. We saved our world. We did it by trusting the right allies at the right time, and by being very, very careful about who we gave our trust to. So you'll think about it, Luke said. It wasn't a question. We'll discuss it with our crew, Okita confirmed. This ship operates on something more than military hierarchy, Mr. Skywalker. These people have earned the right to have a voice in decisions that affect their survival. I'll have an answer for you within 6 hours. Han stood, recognizing a dismissal when he heard one. That's fair. We'll wait on our ship. But Captain, 6 hours is about how long you've got before Imperial scout ships start sweeping this sector. Thrawn's good at his job, and his job is finding people who don't want to be found. As the visitors were escorted back to the Millennium Falcon, Okita remained in the conference room with Sanada and Kodai. The three men sat in silence for a long moment. I don't trust smugglers, Kodai said finally. And I trust rebels even less. For all we know, this alliance is just as bad as the Empire, they're just better at propaganda. Possibly, Sanada admitted. But Solo's right about one thing, we need allies. We can't repair the ship, resupply, and research dimensional physics all while running from an empire that spans a galaxy. The mathematics of our situation are brutal, Kodai. Without help, we have a 4-month window before we're dead in the water. I know, Kodai said quietly. I just wish we had better options. Okita looked at both of them, these young men he trained, fought beside, and come to think of as sons. There's an old Earth saying, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. The Empire tried to force our surrender. This rebellion is offering us a choice. That distinction matters. So we're committing to their war? Kodai asked. We're committing to our survival, Okita corrected. And if helping these rebels helps us get home, then that's what we'll do. But Kodai, his voice took on the steel that had carried them through impossible battles. We don't become pawns in someone else's game. We gather information, we assess our options, and we never forget that our mission is to return to Earth. The Yamato doesn't belong in this galaxy. No, sir, Sanada said quietly. But until we find a way home, we need to make sure we survive long enough to get there. 4 hours later, Captain Okita transmitted his decision to the Millennium Falcon. They would accompany Solo and Skywalker to meet with Rebel Alliance leadership. Under escort. With weapons ready. And with absolutely no illusions about the complexity they were wading into. Han received the message and grinned at Luke. Told you they'd come around. You also told me the Kessel Run was only 12 parsecs, Luke replied dryly. Hey, I stand by that number. Chewbacca roared with laughter as the Millennium Falcon and the Yamato prepared to jump to hyperspace, one using technology that had been perfected over millennia, the other using an engine powered by energy from beyond this universe's physics. Neither ship's crew realized that their meeting had not gone unnoticed. Deep in Imperial space, a probe droid's final transmission before its destruction had captured images of the two vessels together. That data was already being analyzed, cross-referenced, and prioritized. And Darth Vader, standing on the bridge of the Executor, studied the image of the blue-gray warship and felt the dark side whisper warnings about power that did not bow to the Force. The hunt was about to escalate. The Rebel Alliance's temporary base on the planet Orion 4 was not what Captain Okita had expected. Hidden beneath the canopy of a massive jungle that stretched across the planet's equatorial band, the base was a hodgepodge of prefabricated structures, camouflaged landing pads, and technology salvaged from a dozen different sources. Rebel soldiers, humans and aliens alike, moved with purposeful urgency between buildings, their uniforms showing signs of hard use and hasty repair. This wasn't the gleaming military installation of the Gamala's empire or even the functional efficiency of Earth Defense Force bases. This was desperation given physical form, held together by determination and hope. Welcome to the rebellion, Han said as they descended the Falcon's ramp. The Yamato hung in high orbit above them, her massive form invisible against the planet's night sky but constantly monitored by Kodai and the bridge crew. Not much to look at, but it's home for now. Base command moves every few months when the Empire gets too close. Keeps us alive. Luke led them through the organized chaos toward a structure that had been designated as the command center. Rebel personnel stopped to stare at the newcomers, the Japanese-style uniforms, the sidearms of unfamiliar design, the disciplined formation that marked them as professional military rather than guerrilla fighters. Word had spread quickly. The mysterious ship that had embarrassed an Imperial Star Destroyer was here, and everyone wanted a glimpse. The command center's interior was dominated by a holographic tactical display showing Imperial fleet movements across multiple sectors. Around it stood the people who would determine whether the Yamato found allies or enemies in this galaxy. Captain Okita, Han made the introductions. This is Princess Leia Organa of Alderaan, one of the Alliance's leaders. General Jan Dodonna, our chief strategist. And Admiral Jail Akbar, commander of our fleet. Okita had seen royalty before, ceremonial figureheads who ruled in name while others made the real decisions. Princess Leia Organa was not that kind of royal. She stood perhaps 5.5 feet tall, wearing practical military fatigues instead of royal regalia, and when she met his gaze, Okita saw intelligence, determination, and the kind of steel forged by personal loss. This was someone who had survived the destruction of her entire world and chosen to keep fighting. General Dodonna was older, gray-haired, with the weathered look of a career military officer who'd seen too many good soldiers die. He studied Okita with the assessing gaze of one professional evaluating another. Admiral Akbar was non-human, a Mon Calamari, if Okita remembered Ihara's briefing correctly. Salmon-colored skin, large eyes adapted for aquatic environments, and wearing a uniform that marked him as Fleet Command. His species had contributed most of the Rebel Alliance's capital ships, Han had explained during the journey here. Captain Okita, Leia said, her voice carrying natural authority despite her youth. Thank you for coming. I understand you've had a difficult introduction to our galaxy. Princess Organa, Okita replied with a respectful nod. That's one way to describe it. Your empire tried to force our surrender. Mr. Solo suggested your alliance might be more reasonable. The empire doesn't negotiate, Leia said flatly. It conquers, enslaves, or destroys. Those are the only options it understands. We're fighting to change that, to restore the democratic republic that existed before the Emperor's rise to power. She gestured toward the holographic display. But I won't pretend our situation is anything but desperate. We're outmanned, outgunned, and hunted across the galaxy. What we have is hope, skilled people, and a cause worth dying for. Han told us you're from another universe, Dodonna said, his tactical mind clearly already working through implications. I'll admit, that sounded like smuggler exaggeration. But our sensors have analyzed your ship's energy signatures, and our technicians can't make sense of half your systems. So either you've developed technology so advanced it looks like magic, or Han was telling the truth for once. Han made an offended noise. Luke suppressed a smile. Chief Engineer Sanada can brief your technical specialists on what we're willing to share, Okita replied carefully. But yes, General. We're not from this galaxy. We're not even from this universe. We crossed a dimensional barrier during an emergency faster-than-light jump, and we're trying to find a way home. A fascinating problem, Admiral Akbar said, his amphibious voice carrying unexpected warmth. And one that may benefit both our peoples. If you're willing to share knowledge of your dimensional travel, even theoretical knowledge, our scientists might be able to help you reverse the process. In exchange, we would ask for your assistance against the Empire. Not conscription. Not demands. A mutual alliance based on shared interests. What kind of assistance? Okita asked, his tone neutral. Leia pulled up tactical data on the holographic display, a Star Destroyer, schematics overlaid with attack vectors and defensive capabilities. The Empire is hunting you specifically. Captain Thrawn has made your capture or destruction a personal priority. He's deployed additional Star Destroyers to the Outer Rim and instituted new security protocols across 3 sectors. Your presence has disrupted their operations significantly. You want us to be bait, Okita said flatly. I want you to be what you already are, Leia corrected. A threat the Empire takes seriously. A ship whose capabilities they don't understand and can't predict. Every Star Destroyer hunting you is one that's not blockading a rebel world or hunting our transport convoys. Every Imperial captain worrying about encountering you is one who's less effective at their job. That's a dangerous game, Princess, Sonata interjected. You're asking us to paint a bigger target on ourselves while you use the Empire's distraction to your advantage. Yes, Leia said simply. I am. Because that's what war requires, difficult choices and calculated risks. But I'm not asking you to sacrifice yourselves blindly. We would coordinate operations, share intelligence, and support each other when possible. And most importantly, she met Okita's gaze directly. We would dedicate resources to helping you find a way home. Our best scientists, access to ancient archives that might contain information about dimensional phenomena, even force-sensitive allies who might be able to sense pathways between realities. Okita considered. On the surface, the offer made sense. But decades of military command had taught him to look beneath the surface. And if we can't find a way home? What happens to the Yamato then? That would be your choice, Dodonna said. Stay and fight with us, disappear into the unknown regions and build a new life, or find some other option we haven't considered. The Alliance doesn't conscript unwilling soldiers, Captain. We've seen what that does. The Empire uses clone armies and drafted conscripts. We use volunteers who believe in our cause. The Empire used clone armies during the Clone Wars, Luke clarified. Now they use regular recruits and conscripts, but the principle is the same, people fighting because they're forced to, not because they believe in what they're fighting for. Admiral Akbar brought up new data, a list of Imperial fleet positions and recent battle reports. In the interest of full transparency, Captain, I should tell you what you're getting into if you ally with us. The Empire controls approximately 70% of known space. They have 25,000 Star Destroyers in active service. Millions of TIE fighters. Ground forces numbering in the billions. Their economy is backed by the wealth of millions of worlds. He paused. We have perhaps 24 capital ships, a few thousand fighters, and bases we have to relocate every few months to avoid annihilation. On paper, we've already lost. We continue fighting anyway. Why? Okita asked. Because the alternative is living under tyranny, Leia said quietly. I watched the Empire destroy my home world, Alderaan, to demonstrate their power. Billions of innocent people murdered to make a political point. That's what we're fighting against, Captain. That's what the Empire does to anyone who opposes them. The room fell silent. Okita thought of Earth burning under Gamala's bombardment. Of billions dying slowly from radiation poisoning. Of the desperation that had launched the Yamato on her impossible mission. These rebels were fighting the same kind of enemy, an empire that saw entire worlds as expendable. I need to consult with my crew, Okita said finally. This isn't a decision I can make alone. Of course, Leia said. Take whatever time you need. But Captain, her expression hardened. Time is the one luxury none of us have much of. Imperial intelligence is analyzing your engagement with the relentless. They're developing counter-tactics. And sooner or later, they'll find us here. When that happens, I'd rather have you as an ally than a fugitive we failed to recruit. 2 hours later, in the Yamato's main briefing room, Okita faced his senior staff and key crew representatives. Democracy aboard a military vessel was complicated, but the Yamato had always operated on earned trust rather than blind obedience. So that's the situation, Okita concluded after briefing them on the Alliance's offer. We can ally with the rebels, attempt to remain neutral while seeking our own path home, or try to negotiate some kind of arrangement with the Empire. I want your thoughts. The Empire won't negotiate, Kodai said immediately. They tried to force our surrender before they knew anything about us. An empire that destroys planets to maintain control isn't going to suddenly become reasonable. Agreed, Dr. Sato rumbled. I've been reviewing what intelligence we have on Imperial medical practices. They experiment on prisoners. Use torture as standard interrogation procedure. These aren't people we can trust. But can we trust the rebels? Yuki asked. They're desperate. Desperate people make desperate choices. What happens if they decide the Yamato is too valuable to let go? What if they sabotage our efforts to return home because they need us here? A valid concern, Sanada acknowledged. But consider the mathematics. We need supplies, technical knowledge about this galaxy's physics, and time to research dimensional travel. The rebels can provide all three. Attempting this alone gives us a 4-month window before we're dead in the water. With Alliance support, we could extend that indefinitely while we search for a solution. I met this Princess Leia, one of the fighter pilots said, Yamamoto, squadron leader. Talked to some of their pilots too. These people believe in what they're fighting for, Captain. It's not about money or power for them. It's about survival and freedom. That's something I understand. They're also asking us to be bait, another officer pointed out. To draw Imperial attention while they operate in our shadow. That puts us at constant risk. We're already at risk, Okita said quietly. The moment we entered this galaxy, we became targets. The question isn't whether we face danger, it's whether we face it alone or with allies. The debate continued for another hour. Arguments for and against. Practical concerns weighed against moral obligations. The crew of the Yamato had saved Earth by making impossible choices. Now they faced another one. Finally, Okita called for a vote. It wasn't binding, command decisions remained his responsibility, but he wanted to know where his crew stood. The result was 63% in favor of alliance with the rebels, 28% wanting to remain neutral, and 9% advocating for attempting imperial negotiation despite the risks. Okita stood, looking at the faces around him. Then we have our answer. We ally with the rebellion, but on our terms. We share what we're willing to share, we maintain operational independence, and our primary mission remains finding a way home. If the Alliance can help us do that, we'll help them in return. But the Yamato doesn't become anyone's weapon. We fight for our own reasons, on our own terms. Understood? Yes, sir. The response was unanimous. 3 hours later, Captain Okita stood in the jungle clearing with Princess Leia, General Dodonna, and Admiral Akbar. The Yamato hung in the night sky above them, a distant star that occasionally caught the light. The crew has decided, Okita said. We'll ally with you. We'll share technical information, coordinate operations, and fight alongside you when our interests align. In exchange, you'll help us research dimensional travel and provide the supplies and support we need to survive in this galaxy. Leia extended her hand. Welcome to the rebellion, Captain Okita. Okita shook it, sealing an alliance between a desperate rebellion and a ship from beyond reality. Neither party realized that aboard the Executor, Darth Vader had just received confirmation of the Yamato's location. Imperial Star Destroyers were already calculating hyperspace jumps to Orion 4. And the Dark Lord of the Sith had decided that this mysterious vessel would be his personally. The Yamato's crew had just committed to a war that would test every lesson they'd learned saving Earth. And their greatest battles were still ahead. The Imperial blockade of Ryloth had entered its 3rd week, and the Twi'lek population was dying. Captain Okita studied the tactical hologram in the Yamato's briefing room, his expression grim. The display showed 6 Imperial Star Destroyers arranged in a precise geometric pattern around the planet, close enough to maintain sensor coverage and interdict any supply ships, far enough apart that they could support each other if attacked. Dozens of TIE fighter patrols filled the gaps. On the planet's surface, Imperial ground forces were systematically confiscating food supplies, ostensibly searching for rebel sympathizers but effectively starving the civilian population into submission. The Empire suspects Ryloth's government has been funneling supplies to the Alliance, Leia explained, her holographic image transmitted from the rebel base they'd evacuated 2 days ago, just hours before Imperial forces arrived in the Orion system. They're using collective punishment. Starve the planet until someone gives up rebel contacts. It's a tactic they've used on a dozen worlds. How many civilians? Okita asked quietly. Population of 2 billion. Current estimates suggest 50,000 deaths from starvation in the past week. That number will accelerate exponentially if the blockade continues. Leia's jaw tightened. We have 3 transport ships loaded with food and medical supplies in the adjacent sector. But we can't break through 6-star destroyers. Our capital ships are committed to defending evacuations in the Duro system. We simply don't have the firepower to break a blockade that size. Admiral Akbar's voice interrupted, his image appearing beside Leia's. But the Yamato does. Captain Okita, I've reviewed the sensor data from your engagement with the Relentless. Your ship possesses defensive capabilities that could potentially survive the initial Imperial response long enough to create a gap in the blockade. If you could draw their forces out of position, our transports could make planetfall. You're asking us to face 6-star destroyers, Sanada said flatly. Admiral, with respect, those are odds that even the Yamato can't overcome indefinitely. Our shield technology is robust, but sustained fire from that many capital ships would eventually overwhelm us. I'm not asking you to destroy them, Akbar replied. I'm asking you to challenge them. Make them react to you. Force them to break formation. Create chaos. The Yamato's greatest weapon isn't its firepower, it's the fact that the Empire doesn't know what you're capable of. They'll be cautious. Uncertain. That uncertainty is what we exploit. Kodai leaned forward. And when they stop being cautious? When Vader shows up with the Executor and enough firepower to reduce us to atoms? Then you disengage using your FTL capabilities, Leia said. The Yamato can jump without hyperspace lanes. That gives you an escape option Imperial ships don't have. You're not trapped by the same navigational constraints. Okita stood, pacing slowly around the holographic display. 50,000 dead. Millions more facing starvation. It was Earth all over again, innocent people dying because an empire decided their lives didn't matter. Captain, Yuki said quietly. May I speak? Okita nodded. We saved Earth because someone from Iskander reached out across 148,000 light-years to offer us hope, she said, her voice steady despite the weight of what she was suggesting. Queen Starshaw didn't have to help us. Her world had its own problems. But she helped anyway because she believed some things transcended politics and borders. These people on Ryloth, they're dying for the same reason Earth was dying. Because an empire decided they were expendable. The briefing room fell silent. Around the table, crew members who'd survived the journey to Iskander and back exchanged glances. The kid's right, Dr. Sato said gruffly. We didn't come this far, survive this much, just to watch another world die while we could do something about it. But at what cost to our mission? Another officer challenged. Every time we engage the Empire, we risk damage we can't repair, casualties we can't replace. We're not infinite, Captain. Eventually, the odds will catch up to us. They always do, Okita agreed. The question is whether we let fear of those odds stop us from doing what's right. He turned to face his crew. I won't order anyone to risk their life for people we've never met in a galaxy we don't belong to. But I also won't turn away from civilians facing starvation when we have the power to help them. So I'm putting this to a vote again. Do we intervene at Ryloth, or do we let the Alliance handle this without us? The vote was closer this time. 48% for intervention, 42% against, 10% abstaining. Not the clear mandate of their earlier decision, but enough. Then we go, Okita said. But we do this smart. Sanada, I want every contingency plan we discussed for engaging multiple capital ships. Kodai, coordinate with Alliance Tactical, I want those transports ready to move the instant we create an opening. And I want FTL jump calculations ready for emergency extraction at any moment. We're not dying at Ryloth. What about the wave motion gun? Kodai asked. Captain, against 6-star destroyers, it might be our only way to turn the tide. The room fell silent again. The wave motion gun, the Yamato's ultimate weapon, capable of devastating anything in its path. They'd used it to shatter Gamala's battle fleets, to destroy planet-killing weapons, to survive impossible odds. But every time they fired it, they risked becoming the very thing they'd fought against, a power that destroyed without mercy. The wave motion gun is a last resort, Okita said firmly. We use it only if there's no other choice. Our goal is to break the blockade, not annihilate the Imperial fleet. Remember who we are. We're not conquerors. We're defenders. 12 hours later, the Yamato dropped out of FTL at the edge of the Ryloth system. All Imperial vessels have acquired us, Yuki reported, her sensors showing the 6-star destroyers immediately orienting toward the new contact. They're hailing. Captain, they're demanding our immediate surrender. They've identified us as the vessel from the relentless engagement. Of course they have, Okita muttered. Open a channel. Let's see if we can make them angry enough to make mistakes. The view screen activated, showing not a ship's captain but a figure in dark armor that seemed to absorb light itself. Darth Vader stood on the bridge of the Star Destroyer Devastator, his breathing mechanism creating a rhythmic sound that somehow carried through the communication channel. Unknown vessel, Vader's voice was deep, mechanically modulated, and utterly without mercy. You have entered an Imperial military operation. Power down your systems and prepare to be boarded. This is your only warning. Okita had faced death many times. He'd stared down Gamala's commanders, negotiated with planet-killing AI constructs, and made decisions that cost good people their lives. But something about this armored figure sent a primal chill down his spine, a sense that he was looking at death given physical form. Lord Vader, I presume, Okita said calmly. I've heard about you. Dark Lord of the Sith. The Emperor's enforcer. The man who hunts Jedi and crushes rebellions. He paused. I'm not impressed. This is Captain Juzo Okita of the space battleship Yamato. We're here to deliver supplies to Ryloth. Stand aside, and there won't be any trouble. For a long moment, Vader simply stared at him through the view screen. Then, impossibly, Okita felt something, a pressure against his mind, like invisible fingers probing at his thoughts. It was brief, quickly withdrawn, but unmistakable. You are not from this galaxy, Vader said, his tone shifting from command to curiosity. I sense otherness. Something the Force does not touch. Interesting. The Dark Lord's helmet tilted slightly. I will give you one opportunity to surrender your vessel intact, Captain Okita. Refuse, and I will personally dismantle your ship piece by piece until I understand the technology that allows you to defy the natural order of this universe. That's not going to happen, Okita replied. Kodai, show them what we think of their demand. The Yamato's shock cannons rotated toward the nearest Star Destroyer and opened fire, not a full barrage, just enough to make a statement. Blue-white beams lanced across the void, slamming into the Imperial vessel's shields and sending power fluctuations cascading through its forward sections. All ships, attack formation, Vader ordered. Disable that vessel's engines. I want prisoners. 6 Star Destroyers advanced in coordinated precision, their combined firepower enough to reduce most ships to expanding plasma in seconds. Turbolaser batteries lit up the void with emerald death. TIE fighters launched in waves, their distinctive roar filling the communication channels as hundreds of Imperial pilots surged toward the Yamato. Evasive pattern, Okita commanded. All batteries, defensive fire. Fighter squadrons, launch and engage. Sonata, how long until the wave motion gun is charged? 6 hours, Captain. We're at 30% capacity. Then we have 6 hours to survive, Okita said. Let's make them count. The Yamato banked hard, her engines flaring as she accelerated into the teeth of the Imperial assault. Her shields blazed orange-white as turbolaser bolts hammered her defenses, dozens of impacts per second, each one carrying enough energy to vaporize a building. But the wave motion barriers held, distributing energy across the shield matrix in patterns that Imperial targeting computers couldn't predict. Shock cannons fired in rotating patterns, some targeting Star Destroyer shields to keep them defensive, others creating barriers of point defense fire that turned space into a graveyard for TIE fighters. The Cosmo Tigers launched, Yamamoto leading his squadron into a furball that would have terrified less experienced pilots. Transport ships are moving, Leia's voice came through on the tactical channel. They're using the engagement as cover. 2 minutes to Ryloth atmosphere. Acknowledged, Okita replied, gripping his command chair as the Yamato shuddered under another barrage. Kodai, bring us about, target the Devastator. If Vader wants us so badly, let's give him our full attention. Sir, that's the most heavily shielded Star Destroyer in the fleet. Exactly. The others will have to adjust to support it. That's when the transports slipped through. The Yamato rotated, presenting her full broadside to Vader's flagship. Every shock cannon, every missile battery, every weapon system designed to fight interstellar wars opened fire simultaneously. The combined barrage was devastating, not enough to penetrate the Devastator's shields, but enough to make them flare brilliant white and force every other Star Destroyer to shift position to provide covering fire. Gap in the blockade. Yuki called out. Transport ships are through, they're making planetfall. On Rylotha's surface, starving Twi'leks looked up to see 3 battered transport ships descending through the atmosphere, their holds filled with food and medical supplies. The rebel crews had perhaps 30 minutes before Imperial ground forces responded. But 30 minutes was enough to save thousands of lives. Aboard the Devastator, Vader watched the mysterious vessel fight with a skill that suggested extensive combat experience. The ship's commander was intelligent, adaptable, and utterly unwilling to surrender. These were qualities Vader could respect, even as he prepared to crush them. Focus all fire on their shield generators, Vader commanded. And ready the tractor beams. I want that ship intact. But before the order could be executed, the Yamato did something no Imperial tactician had predicted. She accelerated directly toward the Devastator, not to ram, but to pass within knife-fighting range where the massive Star Destroyer's turbolasers couldn't track fast enough. Sir, they're too close, the tactical officer shouted. We can't get a firing solution. The Yamato screamed past the Devastator's hull at point-blank range, her shock cannons hammering the Star Destroyer's shield generators in precisely targeted strikes. 2 generators overloaded. Shield coverage dropped to 60%. And before Vader could order a response, the Yamato's wave motion engine pulsed with brilliant blue-white light. They're jumping, someone shouted. Track their vector. Vader ordered. But the Yamato didn't use hyperspace. Couldn't use hyperspace. Her FTL jump was a violent tear in normal spacetime that left no tachyon trail, no navigational signature. One moment she was there, locked in combat with 6 Star Destroyers. The next, she was simply gone, vanished like she'd never existed. The Imperial blockade hung in confused silence. The mysterious vessel had challenged their formation, absorbed their firepower, ensured rebel transports reached Ryloth, and escaped without sustaining critical damage. Vader stood on his bridge, feeling frustration and something else, anticipation. This ship, this crew, represented a challenge he hadn't faced in years. A threat that didn't bow to the Force or Imperial might. Find them, Vader commanded coldly. Deploy every probe droid, every spy network, every intelligence asset we have. The Yamato will show itself again. And when it does, I will be ready. In the outer rim, the Yamato dropped out of FTL near an uninhabited asteroid field, her shields flickering as damage control teams rushed to repair overloaded systems. The bridge crew was exhausted, running on adrenaline and determination. Damage report, Okita ordered. Shield generators at 40% capacity, Sonata reported. Hull breaches on Deck 7 and 12, sealed and pressurized. Casualties are, 3 wounded, none critical. Captain, we got lucky. If that engagement had lasted another 10 minutes. But it didn't, Okita interrupted gently. We accomplished the mission. Those transports reached Ryloth. How many lives did we save today, Sonata? The engineer checked the data feed from the Alliance. Transports delivered enough supplies for approximately 200,000 people for 3 weeks. Accounting for Imperial interdiction and distribution challenges, we probably saved 50 to 70,000 lives. The number hung in the air. 50 to 70,000 people who would live because the Yamato had intervened. Then it was worth it, Yuki said quietly. Okita nodded, but his expression remained troubled. They'd won this battle, but Vader was now personally hunting them. And the Dark Lord of the Sith was not known for forgetting his enemies. The war had just become personal. The Executor was the largest warship most beings would ever see, a superstar destroyer stretching over 19 kilometers from bow to stern, crewed by hundreds of thousands, and carrying enough firepower to subjugate entire star systems. It was Darth Vader's personal flagship, and from its command bridge, the Dark Lord of the Sith waged a war of extermination against the rebellion. Now, standing before the massive viewport that showed the swirling hyperspace vortex, Vader contemplated a different kind of enemy. Admiral Piett, Vader's voice carried effortlessly across the cavernous bridge. Status of the search. Admiral Firmus Piett approached with the careful precision of a man who knew that disappointing Lord Vader was a terminal career mistake. Lord Vader, we've deployed probe droids to 17 systems where intelligence suggests the Yamato might seek refuge. We've also increased sensor sweeps along known rebel supply routes and placed bounties through underworld contacts. He hesitated. However, the vessel's unique FTL signature makes tracking extremely difficult. They don't use hyperspace, so standard pursuit protocols are ineffective. I am aware of that, Admiral, Vader said quietly. Too quietly. Several bridge officers within earshot suddenly found urgent tasks elsewhere. What I require are results, not explanations of our limitations. Of course, my lord. We have one promising lead. A smuggler named Lando Calrissian reported unusual energy readings near the Kessel sector 3 days ago. The readings matched the Yamato's wave motion engine signature. We've dispatched Captain Thrawn and the Chimera to investigate. Vader turned from the viewport, his cape swirling with the motion. Thrawn is capable. But this hunt requires more than tactical brilliance. He activated a holographic communicator. I have been authorized by the Emperor to deploy additional resources. Admiral, prepare the Third Fleet for immediate departure. We will blockade the entire Kessel sector if necessary. The entire Third Fleet, my lord. Piett couldn't quite hide his surprise. That's 15 star destroyers and support vessels. For a single ship. Vader's respirator hissed in what might have been dark amusement. That single ship emerged from another universe, Admiral. It survived engagement with 6-star destroyers and disappeared without leaving a trace the Force can follow. Underestimating it would be unwise. His gauntlet hand clenched slightly. And the Emperor has taken personal interest in its technology. Failure is not an option. On the far side of the galaxy, in a debris field that had once been a mining colony before the Empire decided the workers were supporting rebels, the Yamato hung in silent running mode. All non-essential systems powered down, shield generators on standby, even the wave motion engine reduced to minimal output to avoid detection. 3 Imperial probe droids have passed within 20,000 kilometers in the last 6 hours, Yuki reported quietly, her voice barely above a whisper as if the droids might hear her. They're conducting systematic sweeps of the sector. Captain, they're getting closer with each pass. Eventually they'll find us, Okita finished. I know. But we need 48 more hours for repairs. The engagement at Ryloth stressed the wave motion engine beyond safe parameters. If we jump now, Sanada estimates a 30% chance of catastrophic failure. 33%, actually, Sanada corrected from engineering. His holographic image appeared in the darkened bridge. Captain, I can give you emergency jump capability in 12 hours, but it would reduce our FTL range by 60%. We'd be limited to short-distance hops until I can complete full repairs. Kodai studied the tactical display, watching probe droid flight patterns with growing unease. They're using a search grid pattern that's tightening like a noose. Whoever's coordinating this sweep knows what they're doing. This isn't random, it's methodical, patient, and designed to eliminate all possible hiding places. Juzo Okita said with certainty. The officer from our first engagement. Alliance intelligence identified him as one of the Empire's most dangerous tactical minds. Then we're in trouble, Kodai replied. Because if he's as good as they say, he's not just searching, he's predicting where we'll go next based on fuel requirements, repair needs, and psychological profiling. A new voice joined the conversation, Han Solo's image appearing on the communications screen. The smuggler was transmitting from somewhere in the Outer Rim, his Falcon currently running supplies for the Alliance. Hate to say it, Captain, but the kid's right. I've dealt with Thrawn before. Guy's not human, well, technically he is, but you know what I mean. He thinks different. Analyzes art and culture to predict enemy behavior. If he's hunting you, he's already studied everything he knows about your tactics and is 3 moves ahead. Then we need to be 4 moves ahead, Okita said. Han, you know this galaxy better than we do. If you were in our position, what would you do? Han was quiet for a moment. Honestly? I'd do something completely insane that no rational commander would consider. Thrawn's weakness, if he has one, is that he assumes his enemies are as logical as he is. He doesn't account well for pure chaos. Chaos, Sanada repeated thoughtfully. Captain, what if we didn't run? What if we made Thrawn come to us, but on our terms? Explain, Okita ordered. The engineer's holographic fingers manipulated data displays. The Kessel sector contains numerous black holes and gravitational anomalies that make hyperspace travel dangerous. That's why it's a notorious smuggling route, Imperial ships can't effectively patrol it. But our wave motion engine doesn't use hyperspace. We could position ourselves near one of these anomalies, use it to mask our energy signature, and when Thrawn's forces arrive to investigate. We spring a trap, Kodai finished, understanding dawning. Use the gravitational interference to limit their sensor range and maneuverability while we maintain full operational capability. It's risky, Yuki cautioned. Fighting near a black hole means any miscalculation could pull us into an inescapable gravity well. Everything we've done since arriving in this galaxy has been risky, Dr. Sato interjected over the comm channel. At least this way we're choosing our battlefield instead of being hunted like animals. Okita considered. Conventional military wisdom suggested continued evasion, preserve the ship, avoid unnecessary combat, maintain strategic flexibility. But conventional wisdom hadn't saved Earth. Desperate gambles and impossible courage had. Sanada, can you give me 12 hours of repairs and still have the wave motion engine ready for combat maneuvering near a black hole? It'll be close, Captain. Very close. But yes. Then we do this. Kodai, coordinate with Alliance intelligence. I want everything they know about Imperial fleet dispositions in the Kessel sector. Yuki, find us a black hole with the right gravitational characteristics. And someone get me Luke Skywalker. Sir. Kodai looked confused. What do we need the kid for? Because he's force sensitive, Okita replied. And if Lord Vader is hunting us, I want to understand what we're facing. Luke's the only one who can explain how this force works and whether it's a threat to the Yamato. 6 hours later, Luke Skywalker materialized as a hologram on the Yamato's bridge. The young Jedi looked tired. He'd been training with ancient texts the Alliance had recovered, trying to rebuild the Jedi knowledge that Vader and the Emperor had nearly destroyed. Captain Okita, Luke greeted. Han said you needed to talk about the Force. I need to understand Darth Vader, Okita replied bluntly. We've engaged Imperial forces twice now. Standard military capabilities I can predict and counter. But this Force, this ability to sense things across distances, to manipulate minds, to do things that seem impossible, that's a variable I can't account for. Luke's expression grew somber. The Force is an energy field created by all living things. It surrounds us, penetrates us, binds the galaxy together. Vader is one of the most powerful Force users alive. He can sense disturbances across star systems, choke someone through a viewscreen, predict enemy actions before they happen, and his reflexes are enhanced to superhuman levels. The bridge crew exchanged uncomfortable glances. But, Luke continued, the Force isn't omniscient or omnipotent. It requires concentration, clarity of emotion, and connection to living things. Your ship's crew generates a presence in the Force that Vader can sense, but your technology, especially your wave motion engine, operates on principles that don't exist in this universe. The Force can't directly interact with it because it's fundamentally alien to the natural laws here. So the Yamato itself is invisible to the Force? Sanada asked. Not invisible, but unclear. Like trying to see something through frosted glass. Vader knows you exist, can sense your crew's life energy, but can't predict your movements or manipulate your systems the way he could with Imperial ships. That's probably why he's so determined to capture you. You're an unknown he can't control through the Force alone. Okita absorbed this. Can he predict our tactics? Our decisions? He'll try, Luke said. But the Force shows possibilities, not certainties. And if your decisions are based on experiences and logic from another universe, his predictions might be flawed. You think differently than people raised in this galaxy. That's an advantage. Then we use it, Okita decided. Thank you, Luke. Your information may have just saved lives. After Luke's transmission ended, Okita turned to his crew. We proceed with Sanada's plan. Position us near the black hole designated Kessel 7. Transmit a brief, encrypted message to Alliance Command reporting our position. Make sure it's just secure enough that Imperial intelligence will crack it in approximately 8 hours. You want them to find us, Yuki said with understanding. I want Thrawn to think he's outsmarted us, Okita corrected. We'll see how well his tactical genius handles a battlefield that doesn't follow his galaxy's rules. 10 hours later, the Chimera and 4 accompanying star destroyers dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kessel 7 black hole system. Captain Thrawn stood on his bridge, red eyes gleaming as he studied the sensor data. Gravitational anomalies are disrupting our long-range sensors, his tactical officer reported. However, we're detecting energy signatures consistent with the Yamato's wave motion engine approximately 200,000 kilometers from the black hole's event horizon. How convenient, Thrawn said softly. His blue-skinned fingers drummed against his command chair. They transmit an encrypted message that we intercept. They position themselves in a location that hampers our sensors but presumably not theirs. And they wait for us to arrive. He smiled slightly. Captain Okita is inviting us to engage him on unfavorable terms. Interesting. Orders, sir, his executive officer asked. Thrawn studied the tactical display, his brilliant mind analyzing dozens of variables simultaneously. The Yamato's commander is attempting to use our own assumptions against us. He expects us to advance cautiously into his trap, giving him the tactical advantage. Instead, he turned to his communications officer. Contact Lord Vader on the Executor. Inform him we've located the Yamato and require his immediate presence with the Third Fleet. Sir, if we wait for reinforcements, they might escape. No, Commander, Thrawn replied with absolute certainty. They won't. Captain Okita has committed to this engagement because his ship requires repairs. He's hoping to defeat or delay us long enough to complete them. But he doesn't know that we've already summoned overwhelming force. His smile widened. He's prepared for a tactical battle. We're giving him a strategic annihilation. Aboard the Yamato, Yuki's sensors suddenly lit up with new contacts. Captain. Multiple hyperspace signatures, 15 star destroyers including the Executor are entering the system. Her voice remained calm but urgency bled through. Sir, they're not engaging. They're forming a perimeter around the entire black hole system. They're boxing us in. Okita felt his stomach drop. He'd expected Thrawn. He'd prepared for star destroyers. But 15 capital ships including Vader's flagship, that was overwhelming force that no amount of tactical cleverness could overcome. Time until wave motion engine is at full operational capacity, he asked. 18 minutes, Sanada replied grimly. Captain, even at full power, we can't fight 15 star destroyers. The mathematics are impossible. On the view screen, a transmission activated. But it wasn't Thrawn. It was Darth Vader, standing on the bridge of the Executor, his dark armor somehow more menacing through the holographic display. Captain Okita, Vader's mechanized voice filled the bridge. You have fought well. Your ship has proven formidable. But this engagement is over. Surrender now, and your crew will be treated with appropriate consideration. Continue to resist, and I will personally ensure that you watch every one of them die before I dissect your ship piece by piece. Okita stood, his uniform crisp despite the desperate situation. Lord Vader, I've faced impossible odds before. I've been threatened by empires that wanted to destroy my world. The void between the Yamato and Annihilation became a wall of emerald fire. Turbo-laser bolts, thousands of them, converged on the Yamato's position from 15 different vectors. Each bolt carried enough energy to vaporize a city block. Together, they represented firepower sufficient to reduce a planet's surface to molten glass. The combined barrage lit up the darkness near the black hole with artificial daylight, turning space itself into an execution ground. The Yamato's wave motion barriers flared brilliant orange-white, energy cascading across the shield matrix in patterns that stressed every generator aboard the ship. Alarms shrieked across all decks as damage control teams scrambled to reinforce failing systems. The ship shuddered violently, throwing unsecured crew members against bulkheads. Shields at 68%. Yuki called out, her voice barely audible over the cacophony of weapon impacts. Shield generators 3 and 7 are overheating. If we lose them, we lose quadrant coverage. Divert power from non-essential systems, Okita ordered, gripping his command chair as another massive volley hammered the shields. Kodai, return fire, target the nearest star destroyers. Don't try to destroy them, just keep them honest. Make them maintain their shields instead of focusing purely on offense. The Yamato's shock cannons blazed in response, blue-white beams lancing out toward the Imperial formation. Several star destroyers' shields flared as the positron streams connected, forcing them to divert power to defensive systems. It wasn't enough to turn the tide, but it bought seconds, and in a battle like this, seconds meant survival. Sanada. Okita's voice cut through the chaos. I need the wave motion engine now. 13 minutes, Captain. The engineer's voice was strained. I can give you emergency power in 8, but firing the wave motion gun without full charge could cause a feedback cascade that. I'm not asking you to fire it, Okita interrupted. I need propulsion. Full combat maneuvering. Can you give me that? A pause. Calculations running through Sanada's brilliant mind at impossible speed. Yes. But only for approximately 12 minutes before the engine needs to cool. After that, we're dead in the water for 30 minutes minimum. 12 minutes is enough. Helm, prepare for emergency acceleration on my mark. Kodai, I want firing solutions on every star destroyer between us and open space. We're not staying here to be target practice. On the Executor's bridge, Vader watched the Yamato absorb punishment that would have destroyed any other ship in seconds. The mysterious vessel's shields were holding far longer than Imperial predictions suggested possible. Fascinating. And infuriating. The target's shields are weakening but not collapsing, Admiral Pyatt reported. At current rate of fire, we'll breach their defenses in approximately 4 minutes. However, he hesitated. Speak, Admiral. Their return fire is precise, my lord. They're not attempting to destroy our vessels, they're targeting specific shield generators and sensor arrays. It's surgical. As if they're preparing for something. Vader extended his senses through the Force, reaching toward the Yamato's crew. He felt their determination, their fear held in check by discipline and trust in their commander. And something else, a collective will that burned like a star, forged through trials that even the Force could not fully perceive. They're going to run, Vader said with certainty. Admiral, tighten the formation. I want overlapping tractor beam coverage. When they attempt to escape, we will seize them. My lord, their FTL system doesn't follow hyperspace mechanics. Tractor beams may not. Do it anyway, Vader commanded. And prepare boarding teams. I want this ship taken intact. Aboard the Yamato, the critical moment arrived. Wave motion engine at emergency power. Sanada called out. You have 12 minutes of combat maneuvering, Captain. Make them count. All hands, brace for emergency acceleration. Okita's voice rang through every deck. Helm, execute evasion pattern Iskander 7. Now. The Yamato's engines flared with brilliant blue-white intensity as Cosmo energy flooded the propulsion systems. The ship accelerated at a rate that made Imperial Star destroyers look like they were standing still, 0 to 0.3 lightspeed in under 4 seconds. G-forces that would have liquefied an unprotected human were absorbed by inertial dampeners designed to handle the stresses of dimensional travel. The Imperial formation, configured for a siege bombardment of a stationary target, suddenly found itself firing at empty space. Targeting computers scrambled to recalculate. Turbolaser batteries rotated desperately to track the Yamato as she knifed through their formation at impossible velocity. She's moving too fast, an Imperial tactical officer shouted. Her acceleration profile exceeds anything in our database. Thrawn, watching from the Chimera, allowed himself a moment of appreciation. Remarkable. Captain Okita has been conserving his ship's true capabilities, allowing us to underestimate him. And now, he watched the Yamato streak past 3 star destroyers, her shock cannons firing with devastating precision at pre-calculated weak points. Now he's showing us what his vessel can truly do. The Yamato's path wasn't random. Kodai had calculated an escape vector that exploited the gaps in the Imperial formation, threading the needle between star destroyers with mathematical precision. The ship's shock cannons fired continuously, not to destroy but to disrupt, knocking out tractor beam projectors, blinding sensor arrays, creating cascading system failures that forced Imperial ships to focus on damage control rather than pursuit. Shields at 42%, Yuki reported. The Yamato had taken tremendous damage, but she was still fighting. We're approaching the perimeter. 3 star destroyers moving to block our escape vector. Load all missile tubes, Okita ordered. Spread pattern. I want a wall of fire between us and those ships. The Yamato's missile batteries spoke with chemical fury. Dozens of warheads, each carrying payloads designed to crack Gamela's cruiser armor, erupted from their launch tubes in a synchronized pattern. The missiles spread into a defensive barrier, their proximity fuses creating a curtain of explosions that forced the blocking star destroyers to veer off or risk critical damage. Gap in the line. Kodai called out. Bearing 187, Mark 23. Take it, Okita commanded. The Yamato punched through the Imperial perimeter, her battered shields finally beginning to fail under the sustained barrage. Hull plating scarred by turbolaser impacts. Systems pushed beyond design specifications. But intact. Functional. Victorious. Prepare for emergency FTL jump, Okita ordered. Random vector, maximum distance. Get us out of here before Captain. Yuki's voice went sharp with alarm. The executor is pursuing. She's matching our speed. On the main view screen, the massive Super Star Destroyer emerged from the formation, her engines burning at full power. Somehow, impossibly, the 19-kilometer behemoth was keeping pace with the Yamato. That's not possible, Sanada breathed. A ship that size shouldn't be able to accelerate that fast. The structural stresses alone. Vader wants us that badly, Kodai said grimly. Captain, the executor mounts enough firepower to overwhelm our shields in a single barrage. If she gets within effective range. Wave motion engine status. Okita demanded. 8 minutes of combat power remaining, but we can jump now if. No, Okita's voice was steel. Not yet. Kodai, target the executor's bridge. The tactical officer stared at him. Sir, our weapons can't penetrate a Super Star Destroyer's shields at this range. I'm not trying to penetrate them, Okita replied. I'm trying to make Vader angry enough to make a mistake. Every shock cannon, every missile battery, every weapon system the Yamato possessed rotated toward the pursuing executor and unleashed everything they had. The barrage was spectacular, a light show that lit up the void like a supernova. Blue-white beams and chemical explosions hammered the Super Star Destroyer's forward shields, each impact carrying the accumulated rage of a crew that refused to surrender. The executor's shields held easily. But on her bridge, Vader felt something he hadn't experienced in years, the thrill of facing an enemy who would not break. Interesting, Vader murmured. He's not trying to escape. He's challenging me directly. The Dark Lord's respirator hissed rhythmically as he considered his options. This Captain Okita understood something fundamental about warfare that most Imperial officers never learned, that battles were won in the mind before the first shot was fired. My lord, they're preparing to jump, Piet warned. Let them, Vader replied unexpectedly. But mark their vector. Log every detail of their energy signature. The Emperor wants this ship's technology, Admiral, but I find myself wanting something more interesting. His gloved hand clenched. I want to break Captain Okita's will. To show him that his resistance, however admirable, is ultimately futile. The Yamato's wave motion engine pulsed with building power, reality beginning to warp around the ship as she prepared to tear open another violent passage through normal space. The crew braced for the jump that would carry them away from certain destruction. And in that moment, before the jump could execute, every crew member felt it, a pressure against their minds, invasive and cold. Darth Vader, extending his power across the void, attempting to crush their will through the Force itself. But the Yamato's crew had crossed 148,000 light-years to save Earth. They had faced extinction and chosen hope. They had survived impossible odds through shared determination and trust in each other. And while they didn't understand the Force, they understood something Vader had forgotten, that the human spirit, when forged in the fires of genuine purpose, could not be broken by external power alone. The pressure shattered against their collective will like waves against a cliff. Vader felt the recoil, a moment of genuine surprise. These people were not Force-sensitive, yet they had resisted his power through sheer strength of character. Remarkable. Jump. Okita commanded. The Yamato vanished in a flash of blue-white light, leaving the Imperial fleet behind. The executor hung in the void, her sensors tracking the fading energy signature that marked where the mysterious ship had been. They've escaped, my lord, Piet said quietly, expecting punishment. No, Admiral, Vader corrected. They've survived. There's a difference. He turned from the viewport, his cape swirling. But survival has a cost. Captain Okita has just ensured that I will personally hunt his ship across this galaxy until either he surrenders or I destroy him. There will be no third option. The Yamato dropped out of FTL in an unnamed system, her shields failing completely as damage control teams scrambled to contain fires and seal hull breaches. The bridge lights flickered as power distribution struggled to maintain critical systems. Damage report, Okita said wearily, feeling every one of his years pressing down on him. Shields are offline, minimum 6 hours for repairs, Sonata reported. Hull breaches on 11 decks. Wave motion engine needs to cool for 30 minutes before we can jump again. Casualties are, he paused, and the number hit everyone like a physical blow. 18 wounded, 4 critical. And Captain, we lost Lieutenant Shima. Engineering section collapsed during the final barrage. He stayed behind to seal the containment breach manually. The bridge fell silent. Lieutenant Shima, a young engineer who'd survived the journey to Iskander, who'd helped save Earth, who'd been planning to propose to his girlfriend when they returned home. Gone. Sacrificed to save the ship. Noted in the log, Okita said quietly. Lieutenant Shima died a hero. When we return to Earth, his family will know what he gave for this crew's survival. He stood slowly, every movement showing his exhaustion. All hands, this is the captain. We survived an engagement with 15 star destroyers and escaped Darth Vader himself. We proved that the Yamato can face impossible odds and prevail. But we also learned something important today: we can't keep fighting this empire head-on. We need to be smarter. Faster. And we need to remember what we're really fighting for. He paused, looking around his damaged bridge at crew members who'd given everything they had. We're not fighting to conquer this galaxy, Okita continued. We're fighting to survive long enough to go home. To return to Earth and the people waiting for us. Don't lose sight of that mission. Don't let this galaxy's wars make us forget who we are. Across the ship, crew members absorbed their captain's words. They'd won a tactical victory today. But the strategic reality remained unchanged: they were hunted, outnumbered, and very far from home. In the medical bay, Dr. Sato worked frantically to save the 4 critical patients while already knowing that one of them, Ensign Nakamura, barely 21 years old, wouldn't survive the next hour. The young man's injuries were too severe, the damage too extensive. And in the cargo bay that had been converted into a memorial space, a new name would soon be added to the wall: Lieutenant Shima. Alongside the names of every crew member who died saving Earth. The price of survival, written in lives that could never be replaced. Captain Okita sat alone in his quarters that night, writing letters to families he might never be able to deliver. Explaining how their sons and daughters had died heroically in a galaxy far from home. Trying to find words adequate to honor sacrifices that defied description. Outside his window, unfamiliar stars burned in configurations Earth would never see. And somewhere in that vast darkness, Darth Vader plotted his next move in a hunt that had become deeply personal. The Yamato had survived. But survival had demanded a price that grew heavier with each battle. And the question that haunted every crew member was simple and terrible: how many more would they lose before they found a way home? The decision that would define the Yamato's fate came not from Captain Okita, but from the crew themselves. 3 weeks after the Kessel engagement, the ship floated in the debris field of what had once been an Imperial supply depot, destroyed years ago during the Clone Wars and forgotten by both sides. It was the closest thing to sanctuary they'd found, remote, lifeless, and haunted only by the ghosts of old battles. Here, with shields finally repaired and the wave motion engine functioning at 90% capacity, the crew faced a moment of reckoning. "We can't keep doing this," Lieutenant Yamamoto said in the enlisted crew's common area, his fighter pilot's uniform still showing carbon scoring from the last engagement. Around him, 24 crew members had gathered for an informal discussion that ship's regulations technically didn't permit but that Captain Okita had quietly allowed. "Every time we fight for the rebellion, we take damage we barely repair before the next crisis. We've lost 6 people in 3 weeks. How many more die before we admit this isn't our war? So what's the alternative?" Ensign Mori challenged. Her security team had been first through the breaches during the Kessel battle, pulling wounded from collapsed sections while turbolaser fire still hammered the hull. "We hide. Run every time the Empire shows up. Become refugees in a galaxy that doesn't want us. We focus on our actual mission, Yamamoto shot back. Getting home. Remember Earth? The planet we almost died saving. The families waiting for us. I remember, Yuki said quietly from the doorway. The radar operator had been passing by but stopped when she heard the conversation. I remember my parents' faces when the Yamato launched. I remember thinking I'd never see them again. But I also remember why we survived that mission, because someone from another world reached out across impossible distance to help us. Queen Starshaw didn't have to save Earth. Iskander had its own problems. But she helped anyway. That's different, another crew member argued. Starshaw gave us the Cosmo Cleaner and sent us home. The rebellion wants us to fight their battles indefinitely. Does it matter? The question came from a young engineering technician who'd been silent until now. Rebellion, Empire, it's all the same. This galaxy tears itself apart while we're trapped in the middle. I just want to go home. The conversation spiraled, voices rising with frustration and fear and desperate homesickness. On a ship where everyone had volunteered knowing they might never return, the psychological strain of being stranded in another universe was beginning to fracture the unity that had carried them through impossible trials. In his quarters, Captain Okita listened to the security feed, not spying, but monitoring as any responsible commander should. He heard his crew's pain and understood it intimately. The radiation sickness that had nearly killed him during the Iskander mission was in remission, but recently he'd felt the old weakness returning. Fatigue that no amount of rest cured. Pain that medication barely touched. He was dying slowly, and he knew it. How much longer could he ask these young people to follow him into battles for a cause that wasn't theirs? A chime at his door interrupted his thoughts. Enter. Kodai stepped in, his tactical officer's uniform crisp despite the late hour. Captain, I've been reviewing our operational status and Alliance intelligence reports. There's something you need to see. Okita gestured toward the desk display. Kodai activated a holographic map showing the Arcani sector, a region of space the Empire had recently militarized in response to rebel activity. Alliance intelligence intercepted Imperial communications 3 days ago, Kodai explained. The Empire is constructing a new weapons facility on Scarif, a planet in the Arcani sector. The facility is designated as a research installation, but the security is extreme. 6-star destroyers in permanent orbit. Planetary shields. Ground-based ion cannons. Whatever they're building there, it's important enough to warrant fortress-level protection. And the rebellion wants us to attack it, Okita said, already knowing where this was going. Not attack. Reconnaissance. Princess Leia is assembling a small task force to investigate. She believes the facility might be connected to something called Project Stardust. Intelligence suggests it's a new superweapon to replace the Death Star. Kodai paused. Captain, I know the crew is exhausted. I know we're all questioning why we're fighting someone else's war. But if the Empire builds another planet-killing weapon... He didn't finish. He didn't need to. Both men had seen what planet-killing weapons could do. Earth had nearly died from one. Alderaan had been destroyed by one. The moral calculus was brutal but clear. Preventing mass genocide justified personal sacrifice. When does Leia need our answer? Okita asked. 48 hours. The reconnaissance window closes in 72. Okita nodded slowly. Dismissed, Kodai. And thank you for bringing this to me directly. After Kodai left, Okita sat in the darkness of his quarters for a long time. Then he made a decision that would alter everything. The next morning, he called an unprecedented all-hands assembly in the Yamato's main hangar bay. Every crew member not on essential duty stood in formation as their captain addressed them from a makeshift platform. Okita's uniform was immaculate, his bearing strong despite the illness eating him from within. I've been listening, Okita began, his voice carrying across the assembled crew. To your concerns. Your fears. Your very reasonable desire to go home and put this nightmare behind you. You volunteered for a mission to Iskander knowing you might never return. You survived that journey through courage, skill, and trust in each other. And then, through no fault of your own, you were torn from our universe and stranded here. In a galaxy at war. Hunted by an empire that sees you as either a threat or a prize. You have every right to be angry. To be tired. To want this to end. He paused, letting his words settle. I cannot give you what you want most, a guaranteed path home. Chief Engineer Sanada and our best scientists have been researching dimensional travel for 3 weeks. They've consulted with rebel technical specialists, reviewed ancient archives, even spoken with force-sensitive individuals who might perceive pathways between realities. And the truth is, we don't know if returning home is even possible. The dimensional barrier we crossed might have been a one-time phenomenon. Our universe and this one might be drifting apart even as we speak, making the gap unbridgeable. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. This was the fear nobody had voiced aloud, that they might be trapped here permanently. So I'm giving you a choice, Okita continued. One I should have offered weeks ago. The rebellion has offered us sanctuary on neutral worlds far from the fighting. Places where we could settle, build lives, try to find peace in this galaxy. Any crew member who wants to take that offer has my blessing and my gratitude for everything you've given. No judgment. No dishonor. You've earned the right to choose your own path. He straightened, and his voice took on the steel that had carried them through impossible battles. But I'm staying with the Yamato. And I'm going to continue fighting alongside the rebellion, not because their war is ours, but because I cannot stand by while another empire builds weapons to destroy worlds. I've seen what happens when good people do nothing in the face of evil. I watched Earth die slowly under Gamala's bombardment while the rest of the galaxy ignored our pleas for help. I will not become what we needed and didn't receive. The hangar fell silent. Princess Leia has requested our assistance with a reconnaissance mission to investigate a new Imperial superweapon facility. It's dangerous. It might be a trap. We could lose more people. But if we don't investigate, and that facility produces another Death Star, millions, maybe billions, will die while we knew and did nothing. Okita's gaze swept across his crew. So I'm asking for volunteers. Not ordering. Asking. Who will stand with me one more time? For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Kodai stepped forward. I volunteer, Captain. Sanada followed. As do I. And me, Yuki said firmly. Dr. Sato moved to join them. Someone's got to keep you fools alive. One by one, crew members stepped forward. Fighter pilots. Engineers. Security personnel. Medical staff. Communications officers. Not everyone, perhaps 30% remained in formation, their choice to seek sanctuary equally valid and equally respected. But enough. More than enough. Yamamoto, the fighter pilot who'd questioned their mission so vocally, stood with those who'd volunteered. When Okita met his eyes, the young pilot said simply, "My family didn't raise me to run from fights that matter, sir. Even if this isn't our galaxy." Okita felt something in his chest, not the pain of his illness, but something warmer. Pride. Then we have our answer. Those choosing sanctuary will be transported to Alliance safe zones within 48 hours with full honors and support. Those staying, he allowed himself a rare smile. Prepare for one more impossible mission. It's what we do best. 2 days later, the Yamato rendezvoused with a small rebel task force near the Arcanis sector, 3 Corellian corvettes, a modified Nebulan B frigate, and the Millennium Falcon with Han and Chewbacca aboard. Princess Leia commanded from the corvette Tantive 4, and Luke Skywalker was present as both pilot and force-sensitive scout. The plan is simple, Leia briefed over the tactical channel. The Yamato approaches Scarif on a false transponder code. Alliance intelligence has provided Imperial identification that should get you past the outer perimeter. Once you're in orbit, your sensors, which are more advanced than anything we possess, scan the facility for detailed schematics. You transmit the data to us, then jump out before the Empire realizes what happened. And when they inevitably realize we're not actually an Imperial supply ship? Kodai asked. Then you fight your way out, Han interjected. But the goal is stealth, not combat. Get in, get the data, get out. Save the heroics for another day. Assuming it works, Luke added, this intelligence could tell us what the Empire is building, where it's vulnerable, and how to destroy it before it becomes operational. We're talking about preventing another Alderaan. Okita studied the tactical display showing Scarif's defenses. 6-star destroyers. Planetary shields. Ground installations. This wasn't just reconnaissance, it was threading a needle while blindfolded and hoping nobody noticed. We'll do it, Okita said. But if this goes wrong, the rebel fleet needs to jump immediately. The Yamato can survive long enough to cover your retreat, but I won't sacrifice Alliance assets on a rescue attempt. Understood? Captain, we don't abandon our people, Leia protested. You will if I order it, Okita replied firmly. Princess, you command the rebellion. I command the Yamato. Respect that chain of command, and I'll respect yours. After a tense moment, Leia nodded. Understood. But Captain Okita, for what it's worth, what you're doing, it matters. More than you might realize. 6 hours later, the Yamato dropped out of FTL at the edge of the Scarif system, transmitting Imperial identification codes and requesting approach clearance. Her blue-gray hull had been hastily repainted with Imperial markings, crude forgeries that wouldn't survive close inspection but might work at distance. Imperial Control is hailing, Ehara reported. They're requesting cargo manifest and authorization codes. Transmit the false documents, Okita ordered. And pray their security is as bureaucratic as Alliance intelligence claims. For 30 agonizing seconds, silence. Then, clearance granted. Proceed to orbit and await docking instructions. The Yamato advanced into the heart of Imperial space, surrounded by enough firepower to reduce her to atoms, her crew knowing that one mistake would trigger a battle they couldn't win. Yuki's fingers flew across her console, her sensors penetrating the planetary shields to scan the facility below. Captain, I'm detecting massive power signatures underground. Construction on a scale I've never seen. And there's something else, energy readings that match. She looked up, her face pale. Captain, these readings match the Death Star's main weapon. They're building another one. How close to completion? Sanada demanded. Unknown. But the infrastructure is extensive. This isn't a prototype, it's a production facility. Transmit everything to the rebel fleet, Okita ordered. All data, all sensor readings. We need to. Captain. Yuki's voice went sharp. One of the star destroyers is moving. They're moving to intercept us. On the view screen, an Imperial star destroyer rotated toward them with deadly purpose. And standing on its bridge, visible through the magnified display, was a figure in white armor that made every Imperial officer look like a toy soldier by comparison. That's Grand Moff Tarkin's ship, Kodai breathed. Captain, if he's here personally. Then this facility is even more important than we thought, Okita finished. Helm, emergency acceleration. All power to engines. We're leaving now. But before the Yamato could jump, the planetary shield expanded to create a barrier that enclosed the entire orbital space. They were trapped, surrounded by 6 star destroyers, with more Imperial forces converging by the second. And far above, arriving like a dark omen, the Executor dropped out of hyperspace. Darth Vader had been waiting. I knew you would come. Darth Vader's voice filled the Yamato's bridge with mechanical certainty. On the view screen, the Dark Lord stood aboard the Executor, his posture radiating absolute confidence. Captain Okita, did you truly believe the Empire would leave its most critical facility unguarded against the one threat we cannot predict? I have been studying you. Your tactics. Your moral code. Your inability to ignore injustice even when survival demands it. His respirator hissed rhythmically. The moment intelligence reported rebel interest in Scarif, I knew you would investigate personally. You are predictable in your virtue. Okita stood motionless at the center of his bridge, feeling the weight of his mistake settle like lead in his stomach. They'd been outmaneuvered from the beginning. Vader hadn't been hunting them, he'd been hurting them. Toward this moment. This trap. Captain, Yuki's voice was barely controlled panic. The planetary shield has expanded to encompass our position. 6 Star Destroyers are moving to attack formation. The Executor is charging weapons. And I'm detecting, she paused, recalibrating her sensors. Captain, there are 15 additional Star Destroyers emerging from hyperspace. It's the same fleet from Kessel. They've been waiting in reserve. 21 Star Destroyers plus the Executor. The Imperial force represented enough firepower to reduce entire planetary surfaces to slag. Against them, one damaged battleship from another universe, crewed by people who'd volunteered knowing this might be a one-way mission. Rebel fleet is requesting instructions, Ahara reported. Princess Leia is preparing to. Tell them to jump immediately, Okita commanded. That's an order, not a request. Ahara, make it clear, if they attempt a rescue, I will personally court-martial every officer involved if we somehow survive this. Captain, they're refusing. Princess Leia says the Alliance doesn't abandon its people and. Then tell her I'm ordering the Yamato to engage the Imperial fleet, Okita interrupted, his voice carrying the steel of absolute command. Tell her that we're buying time for them to escape with the Scarif data. Tell her that if she truly respects this alliance, she will honor my sacrifice by ensuring our intelligence reaches people who can use it. And tell her, his voice softened slightly. Tell her that fighting beside the rebellion has reminded this old man what we're fighting for. Thank you, Princess. Now run. On the Tantive 4, Leia Organa felt tears threatening as she listened to Okita's final message. Han Solo stood beside her, his expression grim. Luke Skywalker closed his eyes, feeling the disturbance in the Force, the nexus of choice and consequence that would define this moment. He's right, Han said quietly. If we stay, we all die and the Empire gets the data back. If we run, the galaxy learns what they're building on Scarif. Tactically, it's not even a question. I know, Leia whispered. That doesn't make it easier. She straightened, forcing herself into the cold calculus of command. All ships, execute emergency hyperspace jump. Scatter pattern. Rendezvous at coordinates Delta 7. Move now. The rebel task force vanished into hyperspace, carrying sensor data that would eventually lead to the Battle of Scarif and the theft of the Death Star plans. They left behind the space battleship Yamato, alone against impossible odds, to buy them the seconds needed for escape. Aboard the Yamato, Okita turned to face his crew. These young people who'd volunteered to stand with him one final time. I won't lie to you. We're not escaping this. 21 Star Destroyers and Vader's flagship is more than even the Yamato can overcome. But we can make them remember us. We can show this galaxy that Earth's last battleship didn't die quietly. He paused. Sanada, status of the wave motion gun. The chief engineer's voice was steady despite the circumstances. Fully charged, Captain. 1 shot. Make it count. Kodai, targeting solution on the Executor. If we're only getting 1 shot, let's make it personal. Sir, Kodai's voice cracked slightly. Sir, if we fire the wave motion gun at Vader's flagship, every Star Destroyer in the system will unleash everything they have on us. The shields won't hold for more than 30 seconds after we fire. I know, Kodai. Do it anyway. The tactical officer input the firing solution, his hands remarkably steady for someone about to commit his ship to certain destruction. Around the bridge, crew members found their stations, made peace with their choices, and prepared to die as they'd lived, together. All batteries ready, Kodai reported. Wave motion gun locked on target. Awaiting your order, Captain. Okita stood at the center of his command platform, looking at the faces around him. Yuki at sensors, calm despite her fear. Sanada in engineering, already calculating how to keep the ship fighting after the shields collapsed. Dr. Sato in medical, preparing for casualties he knew would overwhelm his capacity. Ehara at communications, maintaining contact with departments throughout the ship. Yamamoto and his fighter pilots, strapped into their Cosmo Tigers and ready to launch for one final sortie. These were the people who'd crossed 148,000 light-years to save Earth. Who'd faced extinction and chosen hope. Who'd been torn from their universe and chosen to keep fighting anyway. They were the best of humanity, and Okita was profoundly honored to have commanded them. Before we begin, Okita said quietly, I want you all to know something. When we left Earth, I was a dying man. The doctors gave me months at best. But commanding you, fighting beside you, has given me something more valuable than time. It's given me purpose. Pride. And the certainty that even if we die here, even if Earth never learns what happened to us, we mattered. We saved worlds. We fought tyranny. We proved that even in a galaxy governed by the Force and ancient empires, human courage still means something. He drew his sidearm, a weapon that had never been fired in anger during this entire journey, and placed it on his command console. I'm a soldier of the Earth Defense Force. We don't surrender. We don't break. And we don't die quietly. So let's show Darth Vader what happens when he corners Earth's last battleship. Fire the wave motion gun. The Yamato's bow split open like a flower of destruction. Deep within the ship's heart, the wave motion engine channeled every erg of Cosmo energy into the massive cannon that ran the length of the vessel. Energy from beyond this universe, concentrated into a weapon that had shattered fleet formations and planet-killer weapons, built to a crescendo that made reality itself scream. The wave motion gun fired. A beam of pure annihilation, blue-white and terrible, erupted from the Yamato's bow and crossed the void at relativistic velocity. It was beautiful and horrifying, a statement written in exotic physics that this galaxy had never seen before. The beam carried the accumulated rage of a species that had faced extinction, the desperation of people who'd lost everything, and the defiance of those who refused to bow to empires. Aboard the Executor, Vader had perhaps 2 seconds of warning, a disturbance in the Force so violent it felt like reality itself was tearing. He reached out with all his power, trying to deflect or absorb the incoming energy. The wave motion gun didn't care about the Force. It struck the Executor's forward shields like the fist of an angry god. The shields, rated to withstand sustained bombardment from entire fleets, held for exactly 1.3 seconds before collapsing completely. The beam tore into the Super Star Destroyer's armor, carving through 19 kilometers of Imperial engineering like it was paper. Secondary explosions bloomed along the massive vessel's length as power conduits overloaded and ammunition stores detonated. The bridge, Vader's command center and throne, simply ceased to exist, vaporized in an instant of exotic energy that left nothing but superheated plasma. The Executor, mightiest warship in the Imperial fleet, died. Her engines exploded in sequence. Her hull fractured along stress lines that should have been impossible. And what remained, thousands of tons of broken metal and dying crew, tumbled toward Scarif's atmosphere, already burning from friction and internal fires. On the Yamato's bridge, stunned silence. Direct hit, Kodai whispered. The Executor, she's gone. Captain, we just destroyed Vader's flagship. Vader himself? Okita demanded. Unknown. The bridge was completely destroyed, but if he survived through force powers or escape pods, Kodai trailed off as his sensors registered new contacts. Captain, all remaining Star Destroyers are firing. Everything they have. Sir, I'm reading over 2,000 turbolaser batteries firing simultaneously. Shields to maximum, Okita ordered calmly. All hands, brace for impact. The Imperial counterattack was apocalyptic. 21 Star Destroyers, their commanders shocked and enraged by the Executor's destruction, unleashed sustained fire with absolute disregard for power management or tactical doctrine. They wanted the Yamato dead, wanted to erase the ship that had dared challenge the Empire's might and actually succeeded in destroying Vader's personal flagship. The Yamato's shields lasted 11 seconds. Then they collapsed completely, and turbolaser fire began hammering directly into the hull. Armor plating, designed to withstand Gamela's plasma weapons, held for a few seconds more before beginning to fail. Explosions walked across the ship's length as atmosphere vented from dozens of breaches. The structural integrity field strained to hold the vessel together under punishment that no ship should survive. Hull breaches on all decks. Yuki called out over the screaming alarms. Shield generators destroyed. Wave motion engine at critical temperature. Captain, we're coming apart. Evacuate all non-essential personnel to the central hull, Okita ordered. Seal all sections. Kodai, do we still have weapons? Some shock cannons operational. Missiles depleted. The wave motion gun needs 8 hours to recharge, time we don't have. Then we use what we have. All remaining batteries, return fire. If we're dying, we're taking as many of them with us as possible. The Yamato fired back with her remaining weapons, not enough to threaten Star Destroyers, but enough to prove that Earth's battleship was still fighting. Blue-white beams lanced out even as more turbolaser bolts tore through the dying ship's hull. In the fighter bay, Yamamoto launched with his squadron despite knowing they'd never return, 6 Cosmo Tigers screaming into the void to give the Yamato a few more seconds of survival. In engineering, Sanada worked frantically to keep the wave motion engine from exploding and taking the entire ship with it. Around him, young engineers fought fires and sealed coolant leaks with the certain knowledge that they were already dead, they just hadn't stopped moving yet. In medical, Dr. Sato did what he could for the wounded flooding into his bay, knowing it wasn't enough, would never be enough. He'd saved so many lives during the Iskander mission. Now he could only ease pain as people died from injuries no human medicine could heal. On the bridge, Okita stood at his command post as the ship died around him. He felt the vibrations of dying machinery through the deck plates. Heard the screams of metal torn beyond its capacity. Smelled the acrid smoke of electrical fires that damage control teams could no longer reach. Captain, Yuki said softly, tears streaming down her face as she maintained her post despite the chaos. Sir, it's been an honor serving with you. Around the bridge, similar sentiments echoed. These young people, some barely into their 20s, faced death with the same courage they'd shown fighting across the galaxy. They'd lived as heroes. They would die the same way. The honor was mine, Okita replied, his voice carrying clearly despite the destruction. Every single one of you. Thank you for following an old man on one last impossible. Something impossible happened. Through the view screen, visible beyond the Imperial fleet, reality tore open. Not a hyperspace window. Not a dimensional barrier like the one that had brought them here. Something else, a massive spatial anomaly that made sensors scream with impossible readings. And through it emerged a fleet. They were Gamela's ships, the distinctive curved hulls and blue-white energy signatures unmistakable to anyone who'd fought them. But they weren't attacking the Yamato. They were firing on the Imperial Star Destroyers with weapons that made turbolasers look like children's toys. What the hell, Kodai breathed. The lead Gamela's battleship opened a communication channel. On the view screen, through the smoke and flickering lights, appeared a face the Yamato's crew recognized, Abelt Dessler, supreme leader of the great Gamela's empire. The man who'd ordered Earth's bombardment. The enemy they'd fought across 148,000 light-years. Captain Okita, Dessler's voice was calm, almost amused. Did you truly think we would not notice when the Yamato vanished from our universe? When the dimensional barrier screamed with the passage of our worthiest adversary, his expression became serious. We have fought each other across stars, Captain. We have been enemies. But I have always respected your courage. And I will not allow another empire, one that knows nothing of honor, to destroy what I could not. The Gamala's fleet tore into the Imperial formation with devastating efficiency. These were warships from a civilization that had fought interstellar wars for centuries, wielding technology the Star Wars galaxy had never encountered. Dimensional warheads. Zero-point energy cannons. Positron shock cannons that made the Yamato's weapons look primitive. The Imperial fleet, already shocked by the Executor's destruction, now faced an enemy that operated on entirely different technological principles. Star destroyers that had dominated the Yamato found themselves outmatched by Gamala's tactics and weapons. Captain, Sanada's voice came through, disbelieving. Dessler's flagship is moving to shield us. They're taking fire meant for the Yamato. Why? Yuki whispered. Why would our enemies save us? On the view screen, Dessler smiled slightly. Because, Ensign, worthy enemies are rare in any universe. And because, his expression became contemplative. Because Captain Okita showed me that honor and courage transcend politics. I destroyed his world. He had every reason to seek revenge. Instead, he sought to save his people. That is a quality I can respect, even admire. He leaned forward. Now, Captain, I suggest you repair your wave motion engine and prepare to jump. My fleet will hold this position long enough for you to escape. Go home, Okita. Return to the Earth you fought so hard to save. This galaxy clearly doesn't deserve you. How? Okita asked simply. How did you cross dimensions? How did you find us? The same way you did, desperation and brilliant engineering, Dessler replied. When the Yamato vanished, our scientists detected the dimensional breach. We've spent 3 weeks developing the technology to follow. It seems we can traverse realities now, Captain. An interesting development for future relations between our peoples. His smile became genuine. But that is a conversation for another day. Today, you live. Go. That's an order from one fleet commander to another. The Gamala's fleet intensified its assault, creating a corridor of protected space around the dying Yamato. Imperial Star Destroyers fell back, trying to adapt to enemies that fought with weapons and tactics outside their experience. Sanada? Okita asked quietly. I can give you one jump, Captain. 1. The wave motion engine is barely holding together, but if we route all remaining power, yes. 1 jump. Back to our universe if we target the dimensional breach Dessler created. Okita looked around his shattered bridge. At crew members bloodied but unbowed. At systems held together by improvised repairs and desperate prayer. At the ship that had carried them across one impossible journey and halfway through another. All hands, prepare for dimensional jump, he ordered. We're going home. As the Yamato's wave motion engine pulsed with the last of its power, preparing to tear open reality one final time, Okita opened a final channel to Dessler. Thank you, he said simply. For giving us this chance. I don't understand why, but, thank you. Dessler inclined his head. Perhaps someday we will no longer be enemies, Captain Okita. Until then, farewell. And take care of that magnificent ship. She deserves to see Earth's sky again. The Yamato jumped. Reality screamed as exotic physics collided with dimensional barriers. The ship tumbled through the void between universes, her hull groaning under stresses it was never designed to withstand. Crew members held on to their stations as gravity fluctuated wildly. And then, impossibly, they emerged. Into space they recognized. Into constellations they knew. Into their own universe. Captain, Yuki's voice was barely audible through her tears. I'm detecting Earth. We're home. We're actually home. The Yamato hung in space near Jupiter, her hull scarred and burned, half her systems offline, trailing debris and venting atmosphere from a dozen breaches. But intact. Functional. Alive. Through the view screen, distant and beautiful, hung a blue-green marble that had never looked more precious, Earth. On the surface, 8 billion people who'd been saved by this ship went about their lives, unaware that the Yamato had returned from beyond reality itself. Unaware of the battles fought in a galaxy far away. Unaware of the alliances forged and sacrifices made. But they would learn. The Yamato would make sure they learned. Set course for Earth, Okita ordered, his voice thick with emotion. All hands, we're going home. As the battered battleship limped toward humanity's homeworld, trailing fire and glory, Captain Juzo Okita allowed himself to feel what he'd suppressed for months, hope. They'd crossed dimensions. Fought an empire. Witnessed the collision of 2 galaxies worth of power and politics. Lost good people along the way. But they'd survived. And in a galaxy far, far away, the rebellion would remember the ship from beyond that had helped them strike a critical blow against tyranny. Princess Leia would use the Scarif data to eventually steal the Death Star plans. The Empire would never forget the vessel that destroyed the Executor. And Darth Vader, who had survived the flagship's destruction through the Force and a timely escape pod, would forever wonder about the warriors from another reality who dared to challenge him and lived. The Yamato's legend would echo across 2 universes. But for now, for this moment, all that mattered was home. The space battleship Yamato never spoke of her time in the Star Wars galaxy. Official records listed the 3-month disappearance as dimensional anomaly, classified. Earth's governments, still recovering from the Gamla's bombardment, had enough to handle without contemplating the implications of parallel universes and dimensional travel. But the crew remembered. Lieutenant Shima's name was added to the memorial wall alongside the others who died saving Earth. His sacrifice, and the sacrifices of all who'd fallen in that distant galaxy, were honored quietly by those who understood what had been given. Captain Okita retired 6 months later, his radiation sickness finally claiming him. On his deathbed, surrounded by the crew who'd become his family, he spoke his final words, "Tell them we stood for something that mattered. In any universe. That's enough." The Yamato herself was eventually decommissioned and turned into a museum ship, her scarred hull preserved as a monument to humanity's survival. Tourists walked her corridors, unaware that the strange burns on certain sections came from weapons that shouldn't exist. That the patched hull breaches had been caused by turbolaser fire from an empire in another reality. That this ship had once fought alongside rebels and faced down dark lords of the Sith. But sometimes, late at night, when the museum was closed and the ship was silent, security guards reported strange phenomena. Lights flickering in patterns that matched hyperspace jumps. Echoes of voices speaking in languages Earth had never heard. The ghost of a blue-white glow from the wave motion gun's housing. And in the captain's chair, where Juzo Okita had commanded impossible victories, some swore they could feel a presence, proud, watchful, and eternally vigilant. In a galaxy far, far away, the rebellion became the new republic. The Empire fell. Luke Skywalker rebuilt the Jedi Order. And historians occasionally noted a mysterious entry in the archives, reports of a blue-gray battleship that had appeared during the Galactic Civil War, fought with impossible weapons, and vanished as mysteriously as it had arrived. Some dismissed it as wartime propaganda. Others believed it was a legend created to inspire hope. A few, a very few, knew the truth, that for a brief moment, 2 universes had collided, and warriors from Earth had stood alongside freedom fighters in a galaxy they didn't belong to. The Force remembered the Yamato. Remembered her crew's courage and sacrifice. And though they were gone, returned to their own reality, their legacy endured, proof that heroism transcended dimensions, that honor knew no boundaries, and that even in the darkest times, hope could arrive from the most unexpected places. The space battleship Yamato had saved Earth. Then she'd helped save another galaxy. And across infinite realities, in every universe where courage mattered and tyranny was opposed, her legend lived on.